Blazing Dominion is the first major Yu-Gi-Oh set to be released in 2026. This core booster pack is mostly focused on giving us legacy support, breathing new life into some of these forgotten archetypes, and bringing their power to be more in line with modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Today we will be discussing the OCG release of the pack that will have 80 new cards in it to see what this pack has in store for the future of the game. Do note that the TCG release of Blazing Dominion will have an extra 20 cards in them for a total of 100 cards, so you can look forward to them in the future as well. Now let's talk about some feature archetypes from Blazing Dominion. Needless to say, this pack definitely sells on aura, with brand new support for Crimson Dragon being the main focal point of the pack. This new support further homogenize the deck's play pattern while still keeping its core identity. Of course, this will not be the only legacy support from this pack. Dust off your tickets, because Trains is getting their grand reopening, making sure that you will arrive at your destination with style. And speaking of unlikely legacy support, this one feels like it was pulled straight out of a storybook. That's right, Fairy Tail is now an actually playable archetype. The last legacy support we will get from this set is Predaplant. From small plants to big-ass dragon in full-clad armor? Yeah, sounds about right for Yu-Gi-Oh! Besides the legacy support, we also do get the second wave of support for some of the archetypes that was released in the recent sets. Continuing with their support from the recently released structure deck, Charmers is getting even more cards to turn them from flop to slop. In the last set, Konami completely reinvented Archfiend, which is one of the most weirdly bloated archetypes in the game, by turning them into a ritual pendulum archetype. Well, they're doubling down this set and expand the royal family with their weird new cousin. Let's hope they don't get abdicated before their coronation. And continue with the trend of support, all of the archetypes from the Phantom Revenge set will get their second wave of support with Blazing Dominion. Hecahands has leveled up their sleight of hands to even be better at stealing your cards from you. Enneacraft can now punish you for activating multiple effects at once, making it that much harder to play around the flip effects. Last but not least, Kewl Tune is ready to top the charts with the brand new Turn 0 disruption that will prove to be very annoying. The Medius slow is eating good this set with brand new support for all of their major archetypes, and perhaps a brand new way to play with power patrons, utilizing powerful boss monsters from previous set combined with the newly released Pendulum monsters. And finally, we do have one new archetype that is coming in this set that is definitely not here to clown around. Okay, now let's get into them in more details. Before we get into the specific archetypes, let's start with the standout generic cards that we will be getting in this set. Personally for me, there are 6 standout free agent cards in Blazing Dominion that we need to keep an eye on. The first card, Fidraulis Harmonia, is probably gonna be one of the most powerful and widely used cards from this set. This is a brand new hand trap with a unique activation requirement and restriction. If your opponent activates a monster effects on the field, you can reveal this card and up to 5 other synchro monsters from your extra deck. The more monsters you reveal, the more benefits you will gain from this card. With at least 2 reveal, it can spectral summon itself to the field, which is quite relevant because this monster is a level 7 tuner with pretty decent stats to contest for the board. With 4 or more reveal, you can send one of the revealed synchro monsters to the grave. As we have known from similar effects like this is a very powerful and useful effect to have. You can send a card with a disruptive effect to the grave, like the Wind Pegasus, like the Malong, or the Packbit, to further hinder your opponent's plays. Or you can send a card to set up for the future as well, like the Lulu Walilith or the Jurak Astro. And if you manage to reveal 6 cards, you get all of the previous benefits, plus you get to destroy 1 monster your opponent controls. So it basically is a double disruption and a free body all in one, which is insane output for a single hand trap. The only caveat is that you can only activate synchro monster effects you summon from the extra deck for the next 2 turns, which does restrict this card into a deck that either use a lot of synchro monster or doesn't even use the extra deck at all. Either way though, this is an extremely powerful card that will be an auto include in every single synchro deck going forward now, and it will be a big part of the success in the meta. You might also want to consider playing Magnum Head in every single one of those decks just for the off chance of having this card in your hand more often. This might be a little early to say, but this is definitely a big contender for the best card of the year, and this is only the first set. Who knows though, maybe we'll get the hand trap for Fusion and XZ monster as well. But maybe the Fusion one might not be a good idea. Let's move on to our second monster, Drusilla, the Blood Tree Dragon Princess. Whew, that is a lot of nouns. Fortunately, she does have a powerful effect to justify her title. She can send any 1 level 4 or lower plant monster from your deck to your grave as a cost to summon herself from your hand. Then she will become the level of the sand monster. Also in the same turn, you can banish this card and 1 plant monster from your grave to special summon a dragon monster from your hand or graveyard. Both of these effects are very generically powerful, so understandably, the card does have a very hard restriction, locking you into special summoning only plant and dragon monster during the turn you activate this card effects. Still, this card is a very powerful piece of support for plant deck moving forward. It just does a lot for a single card. It gives you resources in the grave, it's a free extra body on the field, and it is a tuner that can manipulate its level. A very flexible little card that can be used both as a starter and an extender. Definitely gonna be one of the most powerful cards in decks that meant to use it. And even outside of those decks, there is also the potential for this card to be used as a supporting engine in other decks too, that doesn't really care about the restriction on the card, like maybe for example a trap focus deck to boost the power ceiling of the deck a bit. It might not be the optimal way to play with this card, but it is definitely a valid option since there is quite a few good generic plant monsters that you can send to the grave with Drusilla. The classic example include Glow and Spore, which are tuners that can special summon themselves from the grave. The later release Spore and Black Rose card are also pretty good options, just to name a few. Plant stack in general hasn't been doing much in the meta in recent times, so a powerful card like Drusilla could just be the very thing that put them back on the map. Drusilla is also gonna be a very good card in Predaplant with their new support, acting as a one-card starter in that deck. This truly makes Drusilla a standout card from this set, whether or not Predaplant is gonna be a successful archetype. Next up, we have another Dominus card to join the family, Dominus Spark. And like its brother and sister, it is a very good card. It simply target and banish a monster your opponent control. And as with a Dominus card, you can activate this card from your hand during a turn your opponent activate a monster effect from their hand or graveyard. The downside is that if you don't have a trap in your grave, then your opponent gets to summon a monster from their hand. Because of the attribute restriction, you can only play this card in a light or dark deck, which means it does have to compete with Dominus Purge and Impulse. Overall though, I would actually put this card as the second best Dominus card that was released so far, only being worse than Impulse. Banishing a monster is a scary thing to put on a card because this is one of the most powerful forms of removal. The activation requirement of this card is not very hard, most modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks cannot play around this, and the downside of your opponent summoning a monster from their hand if you have no trap in your grave is usually not good enough of a compensation, not to mention that you can also use other Dominus trap before this card to mitigate its downside. This card is also pretty nasty when paired with another hand trap like Nibiru, basically guarantee that you will wipe their board much like with Imperm. This is also the first hand trap in the game that can banish an opponent monster, which make it an extra valuable tool because we do not have access to this type of effect before. A lot of light and dark decks will love to use this card, and it is definitely going to be a pretty popular card overall. It's not going to be good in every meta, and you do have to swap out some other hand traps to put in this card, so it's not just going to be a net positive for your deck, but it's still good to have options, and this card is exactly that. The next standout card of the pack is another hand trap. Well, sort of. We have Diabrocken of the Ghostlight. This is another theme hand trap of the set that supports fire archetypes. As a quick effect, it can banish a fire monster face up on your field or grave to special summon itself from your hand. Then, on a separate chain, it will target and negate a face-up card on the field until the end of this turn. This card is quite an interesting little card. It is a hand trap that requires a little bit of setup to work. If your opponent goes first, this card is not going to be active unless you also have another fire hand trap to go with it, like Ash Blossom. It also cannot negate an on-summon monster effects, so it is definitely worse than Imperm or Velar in that aspect. You do get to negate face-up spell or trap though as a trade-off. What is nice about this card is that it has a lot more utility than those traditional hand traps, because it can also double up as a board breaker when you go second, plus it can be used to dodge effects like Combine or Imperm or Velar. This card can also be used as a extender for when you're going first, giving you an extra body on the field and recycle one of your quick play spell or a normal trap that you send to the grave this turn. Even the card negates effect can also be put to use during your turn, negating the summon lock on Promethean Princess for example. So you can see that there is a lot of nuance with this card that make it quite powerful and reward high skill plays. The biggest problem with this card right now is that there is no easy way to search it, so it is a very inconsistent card in that way. But it might just be a strong enough card that every fire deck will want to use this, especially deck that can send cards to the grave during your opponent's turn, like Rescue Ace or Fire King, or deck that rely on the normal summon to resolve, like Ten Pies or Snake Eyes. Overall, it is a very powerful addition to fire deck, or just about any deck that plays fire monster in general. The second to last card here is Transient Masquerader of Illusion. Ugh, these names, man. Anyway, the card is another generic good illusion monster, okay? We have already had a few of those at this point, but this one does seem to be the best one so far. On summon, you can send any fiend, illusion, or spellcaster monster from your deck to the graveyard. Then you can change its types to match the same monster's type. The important thing that makes this card good though is that it can facilitate its own effect because it can special summon itself from the grave by banishing one spell from it. With a huge pool of monsters it can send to the grave, it can definitely enable a lot of different strategy and can slot into a lot of different decks. The only question now is, how do you enable this card itself? Well, in the last set, there is a card called Nightmare Hand that can be used to fetch this monster from your deck, and then itself can be used as fuel to summon the monster. Because of how well these two cards work together, I do feel like they're gonna make a little package on their own to be used as a consistency engine to deck that wants it. The final standout generic card of the pack is Solemn Report. This is gonna be a very nasty spell and trap card hate that's gonna lead to a lot of frustration. On top of negating the activation of a spell or trap card, you can additionally pay 1500 life points to prevent your opponent from activating a card with that same name for the rest of the turn, or 3000 life points to banish that card and all copies of it from their hand and deck. While the first effect is good in certain situations, like against Mitsurugi Ritual or Apophis Swamp Deity, the second effect though is completely crippling against decks that rely on a key spell or trap card. I will put a few of them here as a reference. As a bonus, you can also use Solemn Report the turn it was set by revealing one other trap you control. This does give the card a lot more utility, as now it can be used to counter some hand trap traps like Imperm or the Dominus cards, plus it can help break a board for when you're going second. Without this effect, this card will probably be relegated to a static card status only. But still, only very specific decks that run a lot of traps naturally can afford to run this card in their deck, so you can probably take a sigh of relief that this card is not going to be a very common card in the meta. Although that might play to your disadvantage, because you're not going to be expecting this card, so when it hit, it's gonna hit hard. And that is all of the standout generic cards from Blazing Dominion. They are all pretty good, and definitely gonna see a lot of play, or at least a lot of experimentation. The Fidraulis Harmonia is a very strong card, but the rest are pretty fair I think. Is there a deck that you want to play any of these cards in? Let me know down below. For now though, let's move on to the meat of the pack, the support for specific archetypes. Taking the center stage of the pack is of course Red Dragon Archfiend. They are getting a lot of support in this set, with a total of 8 new cards in the arsenal. This support basically revamped the deck and give it a lot more options to play with. If you're unfamiliar with the Red Dragon Archfiend archetype, this is basically a very combo heavy deck with the goal of putting out as many powerful dragon synchro monsters on the field as possible. The deck already do have a pretty decent amount of starters, plus a plethora of other cards they can use to search for their starters. The biggest problem that this deck faced in the past is that it is very weak to hand traps, because it had a very clear choke point, being either the Red Rising Dragon or the Crimson Resonator, and they have very little way to extend if one of these two cards got negated. Which is why this deck will be played with Centuria, both as a backup plan and a power boost to the end mode, since you can very easily bridge into Centuria via Auxilia. With the new support though, the deck gained a lot more consistency and extension power, so we can more easily play through some hand traps. Plus, they can summon a lot of new powerful boss monsters, which will definitely turn this deck into a powerhouse. Let's start with the best new starter that they gave, Power Vice Dragon. This level 5 dragon can special summon itself from your hand if you control no monsters, or only dark synchro monsters. And on summon, it can search for any Resonator monster, which there are already quite a few good options. But we also do get another good Resonator monster in this set, that is the Dominus Resonator. This is another monster that can special summon itself from your hand by revealing the OG Red Dragon Archfiend from your extra deck, and it helps you to further extend by giving you an additional normal summon of a Resonator monster during this turn. It can also change the level of any number of tuner monster you control to 1, which offer a lot of flexibility with your synchro summon. The third and final main deck monster support that we have here is Fiend Peace Golem, which is a pretty decent extender for the deck. This level 5 Fiend monster can special summon itself from your hand if you control Fiend Tuner, and you can decrease its level by up to 2. After that, if it is sent to the grave for a synchro summon of a Red Dragon Archfiend or a monster that mentioned it, you also get to special summon a level 4 or lower Fiend monster from your graveyard. While this monster looks pretty great on paper, it does have a few issues. Number 1, since it is a level 5 Fiend monster, it cannot be searched for by these two cards. So now it has to compete with Power Vice Dragon as a search target for cards that can search for either of them. And obviously Power Vice Dragon is a much better card than the Fiend Peace Golem. The second thing is, this monster doesn't do anything by itself, so it could make for an awkward draw if you don't have a Fiend Tuner to pair with it. And one last thing about this card is that its second effect is not always guaranteed to trigger, because you might not be able to summon a Red Dragon Archfiend or a monster that mentioned it using this monster. I'm not saying the card is bad though. It is still better than a lot of the alternative options because you can actually still search for it. It's just not as generally useful as the previous two monsters. And you're probably gonna have to need a little bit of playing experience with the deck itself to know how to use this card properly. Now let's talk about the new addition to the synchro roster of Red Dragon Archfiend, the most important of which is the Crimson King. This is the key monster from this set for Red Dragon Archfiend that link this deck together. This is a level 8 Dark Dragon monster with a fairly generic material of 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner dark monsters. And basically, all it does is that it searches for a card that mentions Red Dragon Archfiend when it is synchro summoned. But also, that is really all it needs to be good. It can also jump off the field if your opponent activates a monster effect to special summon a Red Dragon Archfiend from your extra deck and give it some additional benefits, like double its attacks and make it so that it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. This effect can sometimes be useful because there are more effects being printed in this set that synergize with Red Dragon Archfiend. But another important thing about this effect is that it helps protect this monster from a card like Effects Failure when it is trying to resolve its first effect. The next synchro monster that Red Dragon Archfiend is getting is a little bit weird and also kinda scary. It is the Crimson Blade Dragon. This level 7 Dragon Synchro is a lot less generic than the Crimson King, as it specifically needs a Resonator Tuner to make, and for good reason. On Synchro Summon, it can search for or special summon any one level 8 or higher monster that cannot be normal summon or set from your deck or graveyard, which is a pool of a lot of powerful monsters. Let me give you some example. A common card you will be searching for is the Yugioh Rebellion. This is just a very generically good card, and you will most definitely be playing some Yugioh monster in this deck anyway, so this is just a no-brainer. From here though, things get a little bit interesting. Lava Golem is a card you can search for if you're in need of a board breaker. Not being able to normal summon or set in this deck do hurt it quite a bit, but it's also not the end of the world. It is definitely a fringe option, but it is still good to have the option to search for this card in meta that required for it. Chaos Dragon Leviathan is also another solid option to search for, to hand loop your opponent for one card, which is very annoying and can win you the game on the spot. The Red Eye Black Full Metal Dragon. This is a decent little engine you can play in this deck to add a non-negate to your end board. You just need to sacrifice 2 slots in your deck for it. Habakiri no Mitsurugi. Yes, another way to bridge into Mitsurugi. Now you're probably not gonna play Mitsurugi in a Red Dragon Archfiend deck, but there might be a package you can play to summon the Crimson Blade Dragon in other decks, just for this very reason. Similarly, you can also be searching for the very fun card that is Plasma. This is more of a side deck card, but it is definitely a very dangerous card to have in your arsenal. Overall, the Crimson Blade Dragon is a pretty powerful toolbox card that do give the Red Dragon Archfiend archetype a lot of option and flexibility in the deck building. The card also have a bonus effect where it will destroy any level 5 or higher monster it attacks at the start of the damage step. An effect that activates in the damage step is very hard to negate, so this could be clutch in some certain situation where you need to break a board. Still, this effect is more of an homage to the original Crimson Blader than something that's gonna come up very often. The last synchro monster for the Red Dragon Archfiend archetype is a pretty crazy one. It is the Red Hypernova Dragon. This ultimate boss monster has a whopping 45,000 attacks and 3,000 defense points that required 4 tuners and a non-tuner synchro monster to make, so you quite literally need a full board to summon this monster. The first line of its text also states that it needs to be synchro summoned with the above materials, which is important because it means that it cannot be cheated out by a card like Crimson Dragon. And what do you get in return for all of this work? Well, first of all, this card cannot be targeted or destroyed by an opponent's card effects, which is pretty decent protection. It also gains 500 attacks for each tuner in your grave, so it can very easily get to 7,000 or more attacks. But the really good effects of this card, and the reason you want to summon it, is that it can banish itself from the field as a quick effect to banish all cards your opponent control and in the graveyard. Then you can also special summon a Red Nova Dragon from your extra deck and treat it as a synchro summon. Red Nova Dragon is a pretty terrible card, so you're definitely not gonna waste a slot in your extra deck for that. But the Hyper Nova Dragon is still very much a game ender even without it. With all of the new support in this set, the Red Dragon Archfiend can definitely summon this card without any problem, but you do need to jump through some hoops for it, like managing your board space and manipulating your monster level. You're also quite vulnerable when you're trying to summon the Hypernova, because you're not really gonna have another monster on the field to protect your plays. Players might just overlook this card to settle for the easier to summon Red Supernova Dragon. To round out the Red Dragon Archfiend support, we have a couple of new spell and trap for the archetype. The first card, Crimson Call, is a pretty good extra extender in the deck. It can add any level 4 or lower fiend monster from your deck to your hand, but only if you control a Red Dragon Archfiend or a synchro monster that mention it. Otherwise, you can only add the card from the graveyard. with a lot of different monsters that you need to be searching for in this deck in order to keep the combo going. This card is gonna be a necessary staple for the deck, even though it's not a starter, mostly due to the fact that it is a searchable card. This card also helps with the lethal potential of the deck, as it can help a Red Dragon Archfiend make a second attack during the battle phase, by banishing itself from the grave. This effect is mostly redundant, because the deck already have very high attack monster, so it is mostly just there to have a tie-in with the Assault Mode archetype, which we will talk about later in the video, because they do get a couple of new cards in this set. The final card for Red Dragon Archfiend is the Trap, the Ruler's Rumbling. This trap gets additional benefits when it is activated, based on the number of monsters your opponent special summon this turn. If they special summon at least one monster, you get to special summon the Dark Synchro monster from your grave or banishment. This effect is quite nasty if you get to special summon one of your extremely powerful boss monsters, like the Red Hypernova Dragon or the Red Supernova Dragon, which are both not a hot once per turn effect. If your opponent special summon 3 or more monsters, then Red Dragon Archfiend specifically in your monster zone are unaffected by your opponent's activated effects until the end of your next turn. With the new Crimson King can very easily summon the Red Dragon Archfiend and make it a 6000 attack monster. Resolving this effect of the Ruler's Rumbling could be the nail in the coffin for a lot of decks. The final effect of the Trap trigger, if your opponent has special summoned 5 or more monsters this turn, and it changed all monsters your opponent control to face down defense position. This card also have a bonus effect where it cannot be responded to if your opponent has special summoned 10 or more monsters this turn. This is mostly irrelevant because this card is most likely gonna be searched for anyway, so it is a very telegraph card for your opponent and they can somewhat play around it. I'm not sure if this card is gonna be a staple card in Red Dragon Archfiend in general, but it is a pretty nice option to have for the deck. And with that, we have all of the support for Red Dragon Archfiend in Blazing Dominion. But there is also gonna be a few new cards from other releases that is gonna be an important piece of support for this deck, so I wanna quickly go over them. The Red Dragon Archfiend's Chain is also a very good new trap that I think will have a more general use case than the previous trap we looked at. It can target and negate monster your opponent control up to the number of tuner you have in your hand plus 1. Also, you get to activate this card the turn it was set by revealing one Red Dragon Archfiend in your extra deck. So this is a very good go second card, on top of being a very good go first card as well. The Crimson Dragon Quetzalcoatl is a very good card to end your play with. It is a generic level 12 Synchro Dragon that can summon all of the Dragon Synchro monster in your grave when it is Synchro summoned, and you also won't be able to special summon for the rest of the turn. That is fine though, because this monster gains the attack of all the other Synchro monsters you control, and it can also negate the activation of an opponent monster effect by returning one of the other Dragon Synchro monsters you control back to the extra deck. A very powerful monster that can easily swing the game if you are able to resolve its effect, because this deck do go through a lot of Synchro monsters during their turn. And to help summon this card more easily, we have the Shining Star Dragon. This monster can Synchro summon during the opponent's turn by special summoning both itself from your hand and a Dragon Synchro monster from your grave, and then Synchro summon using both of these monsters. So this card could both be used to give you an extra disruption or give you a follow-up for the next turn. This card also gives a bit of insurance against some powerful hand trap like Nibiru, because you can consistently search for this card with Magnapad. Now with all of the pieces of the deck together, let's do an overview of this entire package. This new wave of support for Red Dragon Archfiend doesn't really change the playstyle of the deck all that much, it just helps the deck do what it already does but a little bit better. The standout cards they are getting from this set is the Power Vice Dragon, which is now the best new starter for the deck, and the Crimson King is now the default level 8 Synchro monster that they will summon. Other than that, the deck still need to use a lot of their old cards to facilitate their combos. Their overall game plan is still to spam the board with a lot of powerful Synchro monsters. And in similar fashion with other decks that also use this game plan, this deck will basically become unbeatable if they get their combos going. To help you more clearly visualize this deck, let's do a quick little showcase gameplay here to see how much Red Dragon Archfiend can do with the new support. Let's start with a 1-card Power Vice Dragon combo. Pretty good, eh? I would say that mode is above average for a one-card combo, wouldn't you agree? Well, as crazy as that mode already is, it is actually slightly unoptimal, because I have to make a Supernova Dragon instead of Hybernova Dragon, and I have to keep the Lubellion on the field. So now let's see how much better of a mode we can make with a little bit more resource. This combo will use a Soul Resonator, plus any one card in your hand as fuel for the Bone Archfiend. This combo definitely make more use of the entire Resonator package of using multiple cards that doesn't have a once per turn effects on them. This basically results in that we have a few higher Paladin monsters on the board. We don't get to search for the trap in this combo though, which is a big part of the deck end mode, so I won't say that this is strictly better than the other combo, it is just something different. Now if you pay attention in this combo, you will see that this is still very vulnerable to a card like Nibiru. You might be able to extend against other hand traps like Ash or Imperm with other cards in your hand, but what do you do about Nibiru? Well, this combo will showcase how to play around Nibiru if you have enough extender in your hand to summon this card, Arms of Janek return 0 under 5 summon, and still have enough gas for your Red Dragon Archfiend combo. How this monster works is that it will negate an opponent monster effect by banishing a monster from your grave with the same attribute. So, in order to negate the Nibiru, you will have to get the Yugioh Rebellion in your grave, which is simple enough because this deck can consistently search for it. This mode is just an example of what you can do with one extra extender, on top of going for the Gen X return to negate the Nibiru. The mode you can make is pretty varied depending on what card you have in your hand. For my internal playtesting with the deck, I would say that this deck is a pretty challenging deck to pilot. There is a lot of stuff you need to keep in mind while playing the deck, like managing your board space, keeping track of how many tuners you can summon, and manipulating your monster level to optimize your synchro summon. The deck also being made to be extra complicated because of their varied and convoluted search targets. Some effects only search for cards that mention Red Dragon Archfiend, some only search for level 4 or lower Fiend monster, and some only tutor for Resonator monsters. So you do need an extensive knowledge of this deck to be able to play it properly, unlike some other decks that is very straightforward to play like Raizia or Tenpai. You can play the deck like a spreadsheet deck, but that only helps you if you don't get interrupted during your turn. With more and more hand trap being printed into the game, and more decks also having turn 0 disruption, you will definitely need to expect to face at least 1 or 2 hand trap during your normal game by the time this deck releases. So it's kinda hard for me to say where this deck will land on the meta. The deck do have a crazy high ceiling, but it really can come down to how well the deck can perform with minimal play, because with combo deck like this, there's always the Mochami to keep it in check, and this deck is terrible against literally all of them. The good news though is that this deck can also use some crazy powerful hand trap that released in this set, like the Fidraulis Harmonia and the Dominus swap. TLDR, the new support for Red Dragon Archfiend will definitely make this deck a meta viable deck. I'm just not sure how competitive they are gonna be. While Red Dragon Archfiend is a cool archetype and has a lot of nuance that we can talk about, we need to move on to our next archetype though, because there's still a lot that we need to cover. Like I've said before, this set is definitely more focused on giving support to retro deck, and what is more retro than Train? This set is giving us 5 new railway cards and 1 very good generic support for Earth Machine. Train is a very old archetype with only a few cards, and most of them are just level 10 Earth Machine with some form of effect to help you summon them more easily. The goal of the deck is just mostly to try to summon as many of these level 10 body on the field as possible to quickly get our rank 10 XZ monsters. The best card in the toolbox include the Revolving Switchyard, which is a flexible field spell that can tutor for a level 10 Earth Machine monster, or we can special summon a level 4 Earth Machine with 1800 or more attack from your deck and make it a level 10. The standout monster to pair with this effect is the Flying Pegasus, which will further special summon an Earth Machine monster from your grave when it is summoned. It can also manipulate the level of the monster you control for an easy XZ access. And the last standout card in the existing toolbox is the Urgent Schedule. This is a very powerful spell that can special summon 2 Earth Machine monsters from your deck in defense position, 1 level 4 or lower and 1 level 5 or higher. The caveat is that you can only activate it if your opponent controls more monsters than you, so it is just mostly a go second card. It also has an effect to search for a level 10 machine monster from your deck if it is sent to the grave when it is set, to make it not a useless card when you go first. So, what exactly are Trains getting in this set? Well, actually a lot of these new cards help enable the powerful old cards that we just looked at. Let's take a look at the new Exceptional Schedule spell for example. This spell will add a special schedule or an urgent schedule from your deck to your hand, but more importantly, it will special summon a level 10 Earth Machine token to your opponent's side of the board, which will enable the urgent schedule first effect, basically turning it into a powerful starter for the deck. Other than that, it also has an effect to help you extend your play by banishing yourself from your grave and sending 1 card you control to the grave to special summon 1 level 10 machine monster from your grave or banishment. And the neat thing about this card is that you can use both of its effects during the same turn, making it, just like its name suggests, quite an exceptional card. Speaking of exceptional, let's take a look at another very powerful new card, the Luctilucent Train. This monster can be discarded to add either one of these 2 cards from your deck or grave to your hand, the Train Connection for meme purposes, and importantly, the Revolving Switchyard. Also, by discarding itself to the grave, it also facilitates its own second effect, where you get to special summon both itself and another Earth Machine monster from your graveyard. This effect is absolutely nuts, because not only do you get 2 bodies on the field, the effect is also not being negated, which means you get extra benefits from summoning them. This effect will only be a once per duel effect, and it will lock you from being able to summon anything but machine monster from the extra deck, which is reasonable enough. For the last of our main deck monster, we have the Heavy Knight Double Decker. This level 10 Earth Machine can be normal summoned without shipwrecking, and when it's summoned, you can special summon 1 Earth Machine monster from your hand. So this card is a good normal summon for the deck, and can also be used later on in the turn as a form of extender. But what makes this card stand out from the pack is that it is an anti-hand trap monster. It states that during your main phase, if your opponent has activated any effects this turn, you can special summon a rank 10 Earth Machine monster from your extra deck by just using this 1 card as a material. So if played correctly, this card can very easily punish your opponent for activating a hand traps against you. Like I've said before, there are gonna be more and more hand traps and turn 0 play in the game, so having a card like this, while it is not as powerful as the previous 2 cards in a vacuum, it is still gonna be a very crucial part for this deck if it wants to have any chance of being success in the meta. Okay, now that we have all of our setup ready, let's talk about some of the new payoff that trains are getting. There's gonna be 2 new cards, and they are both pretty straightforward. The first card, Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Flying Launcher. It's gonna be a stepping stone card in your combo. It takes 2 level 10 monsters to make, and on the Z summon, it can add a 1 Earth Machine monster or a Barrage Blast from your deck to your hand. Plus, you also get an extra normal summon of a machine monster during this turn while you control this monster. It also has an effect to help you deal with the back row, as it can detach any number of material to target any number of spell and trap on the field and destroy them. As a bonus synergy, this effect can also help trigger the Urgent Schedule second effect. As for the second XZ monster, the Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Rocket, it will be a proper boss monster for the deck. It takes 3 level 10 monsters to make, or you can also overlay this card over the Gustav Max by discarding 1 card from your hand. This monster is just a very simple monster negate, with the added bonus that you also inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. Besides this 5 direct support card, we are also getting the Convex Knight in this set as a generic support for Earth Machine. A key thing to note about this monster's stat is that it has 500 defense points, which make it a valid search target for the Ancient Gearbox, which in turn also very easily searchable with the Ancient Gear Ballista. Just that fact alone already make this card 1000 times better, but it also has pretty good effects as well. It is a free extender from your hand if you control a machine monster. It can change its level to match the level or rank of a monster on the field, and the most important thing, it can send 1 Earth Machine monster from your deck to the graveyard. And just from the card that we have seen so far, sending the Noctilucent Train to the graveyard is already very good, but of course there's also other good targets for this card as well. With all of that said and done, what exactly will this new support accomplish? Well, for one, they gain a lot more ways to spam the board with level 10 bodies. In terms of its actual power level, you can definitely put up a decent board with this deck now going first. You of course have access to powerful rank 10 disruption, including the new Gustav Rocket and the stable rank 10 of Varudras. You can also play the Barrage Blast in your deck for a targeted board wipe, and you can also very easily search for a Regulus in this deck for an army negate. But of course, that is if you're only using this deck in a fair way, because there is a huge elephant in the room with this deck, that is FTKing with Gustav Maxes. Because the card is not a hard once per turn, and you have so many ways now to summon level 10 bodies on the field, you can just summon and recycle the Gustav Max and use this effect 4 times to burn all of your opponent's strike points. I want to quickly showcase the FTK here by just using one exceptional schedule. Yes, you just need 1 card to perform the FTK. So, with the help of various Earth Machine support pieces, you can very consistently pull off this FTK. You don't even need the exceptional schedule here. It's just the easiest way for me to show off this combo. FTK aside, the new Trains card being printed in this set are actually also pretty good as their own little package. The 3 cards in the top row can help you summon the Gustav Rocket, which add another disruption to your board. Plus they also have some small effect that is useful, like special summoning a machine monster from your hand or graveyard. So, machine archetypes outside of Railway can also make use of this new engine. Now, moving on to another legacy support. This one is quite unexpected, but it is very welcome because it has a very cool design. It is Fairy Tail. Yes, Fairy Tail is an actual archetype in case you didn't know. Well, I wouldn't blame you if you don't, because outside of sharing the same stat points, these monsters have absolutely nothing in common with each other that link them together. The only synergy that this archetype has is that Luna can add any one Fairy Tail monster from your deck to your hand when she is normal summoned, and the Fairy Tail tails giving the deck an extra normal summon. Well, with a whopping 7 new cards from this set, Fairy Tail is getting completely reimagined and now have a clear game plan and identity, much like how Fairy Tail character transformed themselves with a little bit of magic. There will be a new main deck monster, 3 new extra deck monster, 2 fusion and 1 XZ, and 3 new spells to complete this makeover. This archetype will seem to be a slower control archetype that play around with the mechanic of changing opponent's monster names into fairy prints, which could offer some very unique gameplay and interactions. Let's start with the only new main deck Fairy Tail monster, the Fairy Tail Mashlil. This monster can be special summoned from your hand or graveyard if you control a spellcaster monster with 1850 original attacks. Also, when it is normal or special summon, it can search for a Fairy Tail spell or trap card. It also has a third effect that allows you to pay 500 life points to change the name of an effect monster your opponent control into fairy prints. A few things to note about this effect. A. It does not target, so you get to choose which monster you get to change the name of at the effect's resolution. And B. The effect is permanent. Now, a name changing effect is very rare in Yu-Gi-Oh! And there hasn't been any real good archetype that make use of this mechanic. So it is unclear how well this mechanic will work in the modern meta. Obviously it's better against some decks than other. For example, the Dragotail archetype do need to have the Dragotail monster name in order to fusion summon their monsters, so this mechanic could be very disruptive against them. But against a deck like Yummy, this mechanic is mostly gonna be useless. There will be other Fairy Tail cards that will pay off the Fairy Prince mechanic, but outside of this effect, this card is still gonna be a core card for the deck. Not only will it be a good starter, it also recurs itself every turn and continuously search for a spell or trap card, so it's gonna give you a lot of value over time. A very important card for the Fairy Tail grind game. Now let's take a look at the new spell that Fairy Tails are getting. These will be the backbone of the deck that will enable a lot of plays and disruption. Fairy Tail Ball is a field spell that will add a Fairy Tail monster or Fairy Tail tails from your deck or banishment to your hand upon activation. So another consistency card for the deck that also helps with recyclement. It also gives the deck a definitive win condition, as it can make it so that all of your Fairy Tail monster can attack your opponent directly. All of the Fairy Tail monsters all have 1850 attack points, so you just need 5 attacks for lethal. Not only is this a pretty good win condition, it also hard counter decks that summon tower monsters. That's not all. This card also have another great disruptive effect. Once per turn, when your opponent special summon a monster while you control a Fairy Tail monster, you can target one effects monster they control to negate its effect and change its name to Fairy Prince. This effect will be especially useful during your opponent's turn because it can negate a non-summon effect, since this card will always be on a higher chain link. This will be another key card for the deck, as it does a lot for Fairy Tail. Our next spell is Fairy Tail Long Ago. This quick play spell can special summon up to 1 light Fairy Tail monster each from your hand, graveyard, and banishment. Also, you will get locked into spellcaster monster for the rest of the turn. A few things to keep in mind here. You can only special summon the main deck Fairy Tail monster with this card because all of the Fairy Tail extra deck monster will be of a different attribute. You also will need the Fairy Tail monster in all of these 3 different spots to activate this card, so you can use it during your own turn as an extender without needing too much setup. Also, this card will be a very good disruption during your opponent's turn, because a lot of the Fairy Tail monster you will be summoning, like Snow or Luna for example, will have disruptive effects that are not a hard once per turn. You can also set this card to your field if it is sent to the grave or being banished, so it can be more easily set up as a disruption, or it can also recycle itself if it's being banished by a card like Snow. The final spell for Fairy Tail is the equipped spell Tales of Fairy Tales. This will be the fusion enabler for the deck to help you get out the Fairy Tail fusion monster that we will take a look at in a moment. This will basically just work like a polarization, but it can only summon spellcaster fusion monsters. It will also be the payoff for changing your opponent's monster name into Fairy Prince, because it can also use any Fairy Prince monster your opponent controls as fusion material for the fusion summon. Some other bonuses that this card provides include giving the equipped monster 1000 attacks, and it can also infinitely recur itself by equipping it to one of your Fairy Tail monsters while it is in your graveyard. Then you can additionally normal summon a Spellcaster monster with 1850 attack points. So another fantastic grind game card here. The 1000 attack boost is quite relevant because not only will it make your rather weak Fairy Tail monster become an actual threat on the board, it will make it so that you only need 4 direct attack with your field spell instead of 5 for lethal. This card also being intentionally designed as an equipped card so that one of the OG Fairy Tail monster, Fairy Tail Rella, will have an actual purpose in this deck. One last thing, because the fusion summon effect of this card is only a soft once per turn, it can use its second effect to give you multiple fusion summon during your turn, while also helping you extend by giving you an additional normal summon. Finally, we have the extra deck Fairy Tail monsters. These will not be the win card of the deck themselves, but rather it will help keep you safe during your opponent's turn until you can attack them directly for game. Let's start with the Z monster, Fairy Tail Witchcat, which is somehow both a clever and a stupid name at the same time. Anyway, this rank 4 Z monster requires 2 spellcasters to make, which is easy enough since you have a lot of extension power with the new cards. It has a very important continuous effect that makes it so that all of your light Fairy Tail monster are unaffected by your opponent's activated effect. This will protect your monster against most hand traps in the game, making your turn 1 play much smoother if you are able to summon this monster first. You also will be special summoning light Fairy Tail monster during your opponent's turn with your snow effect or your quick play spell. So this card adds an extra layer of protection for your board, making it so that your opponent has to deal with this monster first before getting to the rest of your board. During your turn, this monster will have an important setup effect where you can detach up to 2 material from this card to send that many Fairy Tail cards from your deck to the graveyard. This will tutor for the quick play spell and the equip spell we just take a look at because they can recall themselves from the graveyard. More importantly, it will be a tutor for Snow. We all know that Snow is a pretty broken card that can enable some pretty degenerate combos. So the Fairy Tail Witchcat, being fairly generic, only requiring 2 level 4 spellcaster monster to make, and able to tutor for Snow, could have the potential to break this card even further. So ironically, the new support for Fairy Tail could be the very thing that puts Snow on the ban list. She's already banned in TCG, but this could happen in other formats too, which is sad because Snow is just very good in Fairy Tail and not a problematic card in this archetype. Case in point, the Witchcat third effect allows you to special summon her from your grave and then sending 1 light Fairy Tail monster you control to the grave. This is a quick effect, which means you can use it with a Snow on your board to get an extra disruption. Plus it's gonna be annoying for your opponent having to deal with this monster giving your monster a blanket protection every single turn if they don't deal with it in the graveyard. Now let's take a look at the fusion monsters. The first one being the Weaver of Fairy Tail. It still has all of the typical Fairy Tail trait of being a level 4 spellcaster with 1850 attack points and 1000 defense points, with a key difference is that it is Earth attribute. This means that this card will be excluded from some Fairy Tail effects, like for example being protected from card effects by the Witchcat. The first effect of the Weaver allows you to special summon a Fairy Tail monster from your deck or management during your main phase. This is a good middle ground effect that helps you extend during your turn, much like what the Crimson King is for Red Dragon Archfiend, but also help you with follow-up and recyclement if you manage to keep it around on the board. This card is also one of the main disruptors for the deck, as every time you summon a non-Earth Fairy Tail monster to your field, you get to target 1 monster your opponent controls to negate its effect and change its name to Fairy Prince. And also, all Fairy Prince monsters your opponent controls become a spellcaster monster. So this is another payoff for the Fairy Prince mechanic. Basically, it's a mini DNA surgery. This will definitely have more impact than just changing monster name into Fairy Prince, but it's obviously still archetype dependent. The key thing about this effect here is that you can activate it multiple times in the same turn, so the more Fairy Tail monster you can summon, like for example the Snow and the Witchcat, the more times you can use Weaver effect. With the right setup, you can trigger this effect a lot of times, basically turning all monsters your opponent summon into Fairy Prince. Now, wouldn't that be a ball? And the final card for the Fairy Tail archetype, the Chronicler of Fairy Tail. It still have all of the same trait and summoning condition as the Weaver of Fairy Tail. The only difference is that it needs specifically a light Fairy Tail monster instead of just any Fairy Tail monster for its fusion requirement, but overall it is still fairly easy to make. This monster adds another layer of protection for your Fairy Tail monster, preventing them from being destroyed by battle, which help keep your key Fairy Tail monster, like the Witchcat or the Weaver, from being easily outed by simply battle over them. If she was fusion summoned using a Fairy Prince as a material, she can destroy all cards your opponent control and inflict 500 damage to the opponent for each that were destroyed. Yes, the equipped spell can fusion summon with Fairy Prince your opponent control, but you will also need the Weaver on the field to make Fairy Prince spellcasters if the monster aren't inherently a spellcaster, because of the fusion requirement of the Chronicler. This very specific condition makes summoning this monster with Fairy Prince a very telegraphed play, so your opponent do have a lot of agency to stop you before you can summon this monster. If you manage to do it though, this will be a very swingy effect, especially since it is very likely to resolve, because this card is also an Omni Negate and you have slow to dodge most effects in the game. Still, this card will just mostly be played for its protection effect and the fact that it has an Omni Negate, which just make it a really good boss monster in general. Judging the whole package together, I would say that the revamp of the Fairy Tail archetype looks pretty good. It have an easy to follow game plan and a clear win condition. The deck can put out a decent amount of disruption, and they also have pretty good protection effects that is annoying for your opponent to deal with. The deck ability to play through hand traps is definitely dependent on your hand, but I would say that there is enough extension here that it would help you to end on a pretty decent board on average. The one inconsistent point about the deck is that it can struggle to summon both of their fusion monsters in the same turn, especially if you don't play the tutor for your equipped spell, or if one of your key searcher, like the Witchcat, got negated. As for going second, the deck do have pretty decent board breaking potential, because monsters like Fairy Tail Luna and Fairy Tail Snow are also good in this aspect. Plus, you can play Super Polarization in this deck because of its synergy with the Chronicler. On the bright side, there are also a lot of generic spellcaster support that this deck can definitely make use of. The standout being the Magistus engine and the newly released Enneacraft engine, which both can help you summon the Witchcat very easily. Overall, I would say that Fairy Tail is a pretty good rogue option for a control deck. It had good things going for it, like having a lot of graveyard value or being able to attack your opponent directly. But there is also some things about the deck that is kind of questionable, like the Fairy Prince mechanic. I do like the Fairy Prince mechanic, it is definitely unique and interesting. I just wish that they have done a little bit more with it, because right now it feels more like a gimmick than something that is actually exciting. The last of the legacy support for this set will be Predaplant. They are rocking 6 new cards in this set, 5 of which are direct support and 1 new polarization spell that work very well for the deck. You probably know Predaplant as a weird combo deck, which is sort of true, but it is also one of the most basic fusion deck out there. Their main deck monster effects are quite basic and honestly kinda boring. If you stare at them for too long, you probably won't even know which card is which because they all kinda look the same. The real interesting part about the deck is the fusion monsters that play around with the mechanic of placing counter on opposing monster and apply negative effect to them. A problem that this deck faces is that a lot of their fusion monsters are really difficult to make and require a lot of resources, to the point that they are not even worth it to make. So, let's see how the new support tackle this problem. The 2 new main deck monsters for Predaplant will be the Predaplant Lizard and the Predaplant Longilophila. The Lizard is a level 3 monster with 1200 attack and defense point, and state that if you control a Predaplant or a Starving Venom monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, then you can add a Polarization from your deck to your hand. This is gonna be an important extender for the deck, because adding a Polarization is good to go into your fusion play, but also the body of the field is gonna be important. You will understand why in a moment. While you control this monster, it has an effect to target a face-up monster on the field to change its attribute to dark for the rest of the turn. This is mostly gonna be a go second effect, and it does have some interesting use case in certain situations. Like for example, it can turn up Promethean Princess Disruption effect if they only control 1 fire monster, and you change its attribute to dark. But how Predaplant will want to use this effect is that they will want to fuse with an opposing monster that has the dark attribute. This is already a part of Predaplant core mechanic, and it makes it so that the deck is extra good against dark decks, but now this will help them against deck of other attributes as well. The main card for Predaplant that will enable this play will be the Sundew, that allow you to fuse with an opposing monster that has a Predator counter on it. There is of course the very divisive Super Polarization, which is a card that this deck can search for. And also there is the new Overprint card for Predaplant from the collector box that also allow you to fuse with opponent monsters. The final effect of Lizard allow you to draw 1 card when it is special summoned from the graveyard. Predaplant can burn through their resource pretty rapidly because they don't have an efficient fusion summon. So an effect like this is really nice for the deck. You don't even have to go out of your way to trigger it either, because this will be a natural part of your normal combo. Our second main deck monster is the Longilophila. This is one of the new starters for Predaplant that can search for any Predap card when it is summoned. The key target for this card will be of course the Lizard as a direct extender, or the new Predap spell from this set that we will get into later. Aside from that, you can also consider one of the old Predap spell as an extra follow-up, or alternatively, searching for the Predaplant as a part of your endboard. Longilophila's second effect allow you to banish it from the graveyard to either place a Predator counter on a monster on the field, or to send one polymerization from your grave or banishment. Placing a Predator counter will change the monster level to 1, which is always the case for all effects of Predaplant that place Predator counter. This effect will not often be useful, but out of all of the main deck monster, this will be the easiest way to place Predator counter. The payoff for doing this during your turn would be using a card like Envelope Melodies that can tribute an opponent monster with a Predator counter on it to activate this effect, or to use it in tandem with the Lizard to enable Sundew to fusion summon with the opposing monster that you place a counter on. Other than that, recycling polymerization will still be your go-to play when you go first. Like I've alluded to before, having the Predaplant monster on the field is now gonna be important to the deck, because this will not just only be a fusion deck, it will also be a synchro deck going forward. The level 1 tuner Longi Filler and a level 3 Predaplant monster, like the Lizard for example, together will make the new Predaplant Baltea. This monster can special summon a Predaplant or a Starving Venom monster in your face-up extra deck or in your graveyard when it is synchro summoned, so there is a lot of utility here. It will mostly be used to extend your play by bringing back one of your Predaplant monster, but it can also bring back one of your fusion monster if you summon it later in the game. For the most part, this will be a stepping stone monster for Predaplant. Because it is a tuner itself, it can help facilitate further synchro play, like for example summoning the Bramble Rose Dragon, which will further help you summon the Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon. Also, another monster that you would want to summon is the Clear Wing Synchro Dragon, which will be important for a later card we will look at. Baltea also have a pretty good effect in the graveyard. If a monster is special summoned to your opponent's field, you can banish this card and one polymerization from your grave to basically use the poly effect and perform a fusion summon. This adds another layer of disruptive power to your board, helping you bring out another fusion monster once you have used all of the disruption that you have on your board. And also, it can be cleverly used to dodge an opposing effect that target your monster by using this effect in the correct sequence. You can also rely on this effect to help you not overcommit under a card like Fidraulis. Now, let's talk about the new spell for Predaplant, Preda Primitive. This is also going to be one of the key cards for the deck, because it's essentially going to be trading 1 for 2. It can send a Predap card from your deck to the graveyard, which will usually be Predaplant Blip that can search for another Predaplant monster. Also, it's gonna tutor for any fusion or polymerization spell, like the one I've shown here for example. The important thing to keep in mind here is that sending the Predap card to the graveyard is the cost to activate Preda Primitive, which means that part of the effect cannot be Ash. With both Drosselia and this spell being the one card starter for the deck and doesn't fear a card like Ash, plus the deck's new ability to synchro summon the Crystal Wing, Predaplant can pretty comfortably play against the fair hand traps. The card will lock you into plant and dragon type monster only, but that doesn't really affect this deck much because the deck already doesn't really want to mix with other archetypes anyway. The card also have an additional graveyard effect that reads a little bit weird, but it's actually a pretty good effect. You can banish it from your grave to destroy one of your fusion monster if there is a monster special summoned to your opponent's field. Some Predaplant fusion monster do have really good effects when they are being destroyed, like the Starving Venom Fusion Dragon for example, can destroy all of the opponent's special summoned monsters. So this card is a pretty good way to trigger some of this effect that would normally not be triggered otherwise, because your opponent will play around it. Next up on the list, we have the Apex Polymerization, or the Apex Fusion. This is strictly not a Predaplant card, but since this deck can make the most use out of this card right now, I will include the review for it here. You can pay 2000 life points, then target one effect monster on the field. Special summon one monster from your extra deck with the same type and attribute as the targeted monster, but with its effect negated. Then you can choose one of these two effects to resolve. You can either fusion summon by using both of those monsters, or you can send the special summon monster by this effect to the graveyard. And just for funsies, this card has the super polymerization treatment of neither player can activate any cards or effect in response to this card activation. If you think of this as a standalone card, there is a couple of use cases for this. First, it can be used as a mode breaker, much like its counterpart, the super polymerization. They both require a bit of extra deck commitment, but the Apex Fusion can only be used to out very specific monsters, while the super polymerization has a much wider range. The only real advantage that Apex Fusion has against super polymerization is that you don't need to discard a card from your hand, and it can be searched for with a triple tactic thrust. Other than that, the cards still need to target a monster on the field, and it can only out one monster. So I don't think it's a compelling enough of a card to be used as a mode breaker. Which brings us to its second use case that Predaplant will actually want to use. Apex Fusion can help Predaplant summon their boss monster that is normally really hard to summon. Let's take the Greedy Venom Fusion Dragon for example. This monster requires a Predaplant and a level 8 or higher fusion monster. With Apex Fusion, you can easily summon this monster with just any level of a Predaplant monster by basically cheating out the harder requirement for the card. In the case of the Predapower Fusion Dragon, this monster even requires 2 fusion monsters to make. That is a lot of resources for just one card and certainly not worth the effort. But now with Apex Fusion, you can more easily go into this powerful monster by just using one of your Stepping Stone Fusion monster, and the Apex Fusion will substitute for the other one. You can even use a monster with a graveyard effect for your Apex Fusion to get additional benefit from it. Like for example, the Rafflesia here can be a follow-up to search for a Polarization or Fusion spell, or you can use a monster like a Navion to set the Fallen and the Virtuous during the end phase. Of course, the added benefit of using Apex Fusion in this deck is that there is a lot of effect that can search for it. So while the card is not a core part of the deck, it's still gonna make it feel a lot smoother to play and help you get out your boss monster a lot faster. Speaking of boss monster, they will also be getting a new one in this set, the Starving Venom Winged Dragon. This will be a level 10 Fusion Petalum monster with 3300 attack and 2500 defense, so pretty big stat overall. It's gonna require a Fusion and a Clear Wing monster to make, which is why I've said having the Clear Wing Synchro Dragon earlier is gonna be important. This monster is gonna have 2 disruption on the field. The first one is, when your opponent special summon a monster, you can target one of them. This card will gain the attack equal to that monster, and if you do, negate that monster effect. The second disruption will be when your opponent activates any card or effects on the field, you can non-target destroy any card on the field. Both of these effects are not a hard ones per turn, so if you manage to get the second copy of this card on the board, you will get double amount of disruption. This card also have an important scale effect that will continuously put Predator counter on monster your opponent special summon. Their level will of course become 1, so this will basically be a floodgate against certain decks, but if you also have a card like Draco's Superior on the field, this will become a one-sided skill drain. With the help of the new spell, Predaplant Primitive, you can very easily scale this monster after you have done using its options. This monster is not the easiest to make, but it is definitely worth the investment, and the fusion requirement here is open-ended enough that it has the potential to be used in other decks as well. With the new support, Predaplant get a lot of new starters, which is something that they were lacking before. With Longila Villa and Predaplant Primitive, plus the Tracelia, make for a total of 9 new starters for the deck, a pretty decent amount all things considered. They are also now utilizing the Synchro mechanic as a stepping stone during their combo to both make better use of the bodies they summon on the field and also go into monsters that help protect their fusion play. Not only that, they will now have an easier time to summon their big boss monsters with Apex Polarization to make their play simpler and less convoluted, and a brand new boss monster that rewards you for going to both Synchro and Fusion play. When it comes down to the details, I would say that the deck is pretty flexible with the board they can make. You don't really rely on any one boss monster to win. They are pretty interchangeable, so there is a lot of freedom in your play and you can sort of customize your board depending on your matchup. Because of the combo is so fluid in this deck, I would just try to give you a general roadmap of what you're trying to do in your turn. Here you have one of your starters in the deck that you'll hopefully be able to draw into. They will get you to one of your follow-up that will give you the resource you need to go into your fusion and your synchro play. From here, you will gain access to one of your smaller fusion and synchro monsters that will further generate you resources, while they themselves also going to be important to be used as material for further plays. From here, you can go into your bigger synchro monster with the leftover bodies you have on the field, and you can also start going to your bigger fusion monster with the fusion spell you tutor. The final step of your turn should be to aim for one of your really big boss monsters, although they are not completely necessary. The card that I show above the arrow are the typical way that you will use to go into these monsters, while the card below the arrow will provide you the extra necessary material. Besides the monster disruption on your field, you can also search for Predaplanting to reinforce your end board. And don't forget, you will also have the Predaplant Primitive and the Predaplant out there in your grave that will also provide their own form of disruption. To conclude, this new support will make Predaplant a pretty interesting mix between both fusion and synchro plays. The main form of disruption will lean heavily into monster negation and monster destruction. There are gonna be some weaknesses to the deck of course, but still this is gonna be a pretty competent deck in the meta. And fret not, they already announced for new support for this deck in the upcoming set, plus we're all getting the new Overframe card that is also pretty great. Now we are officially done with all of the legacy support from this set, let's move on to the continual support for some of the recent releases. The first one here will be Charmers, which will get 3 new cards in Blazing Dominion. The support in the structure deck give them a crazy powerful new spell and an actual payoff monster for the archetype, which was definitely needed because this was purely a meme archetype that pieced together some unrelated monsters just for the sake of the narrative. So they're definitely gonna need a lot more than just 1 or 2 strong cards to make the deck viable. Let's start with a new monster, Familiars of the Spiritual Arts. The art of the card do combine all 4 Familiars of the Charmers, but it would seem that the Gaga Gigo is the ringleader of the party here because this monster is a water reptile. On summon, this monster can search for a possessed spell trap or a grand spiritual art, Ichirin. An important note about the design of this card, the Ichirin can also search for this monster because it has the 1500 attacks and 200 defense stat line. On the field, this monster can change into any one type and attribute you want, which means it can be used to make everyone's favorite charmers, Fiendsmith, when the Fiend is truly smithing. I don't know, maybe at this point just ban the Requiem already. Okay, for the last effect of the Familiar, if it is destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can special summon one spellcaster monster with exactly 1500 defense from your deck or graveyard. It is a really good effect in theory, but since Charmers doesn't have any inherent way to trigger this effect themselves, it's become just kinda bad. You're not really gonna keep this card around on your end board either, but who knows, maybe it was designed with a future card in mind. You'll never really know with a deck like this. What about one of the new spells that this card can search for, the Possess Resonant? This card can target a face-up monster on the field, then you can special summon a Charmer or a familiar possessed monster with the same attribute as the targeted monster from your hand, deck or graveyard in either attack or face-down defense position. Then you can change the targeted monster into face-down defense position. You can also banish this card from your grave to change the battle position of a monster you control. Well, this card was obviously designed to be used with the original Charmers, because this can summon the monster in face-down defense position and then trigger its effect right away by banishing itself from the graveyard. It also will commune the monster that it targets, so this is a pretty efficient board breaker if it's actually allowed to resolve. It can also fetch for the familiar if you go first, which is gonna be the only good target for this card right now. You will need to have a water monster on the board for this, but since now the deck also plays the Spellbook Magician to fetch for the OP spell card, which is also a Spellbook, the deck is definitely gonna play more water than any of the other attributes. The last Charmer in this set will be the 4 Charmer in Profusion. This is gonna be another payoff card for the deck, as it is a Link 4 monster with very generic requirement of just any 2+ monsters. It can gain 300 attacks for each of the different attributes on the field. So with 6 different attributes, it can gain 1800 attacks, which make it a maximum 3650 attack monster. Once while it's on the field, it has a quick effect to special summon 2 monsters from your graveyard that have either the same attribute but different type, or the same type but different attribute. All of the monsters special summoned by this effect and this card as well will not be able to be used as a material for any summoning mechanic for the next 2 turns. It is a really powerful effect, and there are plenty of ways you can use the monster you summon with this effect without using them for any of the summoning mechanic. Because this card is completely generic and also have an abusable effect, so there are gonna be decks, especially combo pile, it's gonna make use of this card one way or another. In a pure Charmer deck, one way you can use this effect is to help summon your possessed monster in your deck more easily, which are all pretty resource heavy. These monsters can search your deck for a spiritual art card, which the 2 that I have listed here are the 2 best ones. So can this new support finally make Charmer playable? No, not really. The new cards here are cool and all, but the matter of the fact is, you still need to actually play the Charmer monster in your deck, which all versions of them are all terrible. There is no chance that a deck that has to play this many bricks in their deck can ever really become good. They have a few gimmicks that they can do right now that can help them win a few games if you want to have some fun, but in general, this still will not be a playable deck. The good thing is that there will be new Charmers cards that will be coming in the future, but I do think that they really need new Charmers monster to make the deck actually playable. The next archetype is getting new support in this set is gonna be Archfiend, which are getting 2 new cards, the DoomZ Archfiend and the Archfiend Usurpation. Now, the entire Archfiend archetype is a giant question mark. Archfiend is actually a real and a very old archetype in the game. In the last set, they decided to print new support for the deck that isn't actually new support, but basically an entire new archetype with the same name. They are now a ritual archetype that play around a bit with the Pendulum mechanic without actually Pendulum summon. Their boss monster is the Doom Emperor Archfiend, which is unaffected by other monster effect only while it is in the extra monster zone and has a powerful board wipe when it is ritual summoned from the extra deck. Other than that, the deck can also use the Archfiend Matador to search for one of the main Archfiend traps or one of the other random traps that also have Archfiend in its name to be their main form of disruptions. This web of support gives the deck another boss monster that they can summon in place of the Doom Emperor Archfiend, plus 1 more consistency piece. The DoomZ Archfiend is a level 7 Light Fiend monster with 2100 attacks and 2900 defense. It is still gonna be unaffected by monster effect while it is in the extra monster zone. And instead of banishing all monster, this one is gonna destroy all spell and trap your opponent control when it is ritual summoned. Plus, if it's in the extra monster zone, you can banish all spell and trap from your opponent's graveyard. So it is a pretty strong spell and trap removal, and it can also deny a lot of value from the graveyard, because a lot of modern spell and trap cards do have graveyard effects. This monster will give the deck another tool it can use to deal with more different decks and strategies in the game, which will prove to be a valuable asset to this deck game plan. This monster Pendulum effect allows you to destroy itself to recycle one of your Archfiend spell or trap that is in your grave or banishment. a nice little bonus effect that will basically be a free resource because you can always ritual this card from your archetype. And speaking of which, the Archfiend Usurpation is a flexible new quick play spell for the deck. The card basically does everything the deck wanted. Its first effect allows you to set one Archfiend trap from your deck or graveyard and allow you to activate that card right away. It can be used as a starter or an extender by setting the Archfiend's chest or give you an extra disruption on the board. The second effect is also just as useful as the first one, as it allows you to ritual summon a monster from your hand or from your face-up archetype. It's simple but very powerful because of the fact that this is a quick play spell. Both of the ritual monsters do have really powerful on-summon effect to either banish a monster on the field or to wipe your opponent's background and are unaffected by monster effects. So this spell will turn those monsters into actual disruption rather than just a fact that you use on your own turn. This is only a couple of new cards, but they already do really help Archfiend to cover a lot of their weaknesses. This is a really passive archetype in general, and the main way to win is not even to rely on their own cards, but rather other cards from outside the archetype that just happen to have Archfiend in its name. So it's nice to see that the deck can now use their own boss monster as a form of disruption rather than just a meat bag with the help of the quick play spell. There should also be at least another wave of support for this archetype in future set as well, because 2 of the 3 main deck monsters already have their ritual form, so the new Archfiend should also be having one as well. As a closing note about this archetype, I would just like to say that this is one of the most cleverly designed teams in recent times. The whole story of Archfiend is about 3 royals who are trying to vie for the throne, and whoever is in the throne gains tremendous amount of power. In the game itself, the throne is represented by the extra monster zone, which is why the ritual monster gain extra effects while they're in the extra monster zone. The extra clever part about this is that if you want to ritual summon a new Archfiend card and want to gain the extra effects from it, you will have to use the monster that is already in your extra monster zone for the ritual summon, which really reinforces the fantasy here, that there can be only one person to wear the crown, and if you want to claim the throne for yourself, then you have to topple the current regime. Now let's talk about something more spicy, shall we? The support for the next few decks are definitely gonna make big meta impact. All of the major archetypes from the Phantom Revenge set, which include Hecahands, Kewl Tune, and Enneacraft, are all getting 3 new cards from Blazing Dominion. Starting off with Hecahands, they gain the new main deck monster, Bugabel, the new fusion monster, Dominus, and the continuous trap, Baked Owl. Hecahands is an illusion themed archetype, with the main game plan is to literally steal your monster away from you and use them against you. They have 3 main deck monsters, Goldos, Gygas, and Brewers, that can steal a monster from your graveyard, from the top 3 cards of your deck, and randomly in your hand respectively. Also, the big boss monster, Hecahands Xeno, can also steal monster from your extra deck. The main benefit of doing this is that they can use this monster for their fusion summon, either by Yowza's own effects or by Hecahands Tartarus. Their main line of defense will be the counter traps, It Owl, and Yat Owl, which will deal with spell trap and monster effects respectively and either set the spell trap or special summon the monster to your field. Right now the deck main win con is to whittle down your resource and outvalue you over multiple turns. Also, they can steal a key piece of your deck away from you, which depending on the deck could completely ruin your gameplay. This is a pretty decent deck overall, but it has never been a top tier deck because the deck has way too inconsistent gameplay. So let's take a look at the new cards they are getting. First up, we have Hecahands Bugabel. This monster can be revealed from your hand to fusion summon a Hecahands monster by using itself as a material. And if an illusion monster is sent to your graveyard, you can add this card from your grave to your hand. It is a very simple card that is just a basic fusion enabler and can continuously recycle itself, but it is gonna be a very valuable card to Hecahands, because right now, Hecahands only really have one card to help it fusion summon, that is the Tartarus. Yowza is your main fusion monster that is an important setup piece for the deck, and if Hecahands whip the steal effects, then Yowza won't be able to very easily summon by using the opponent monster, which is gonna weaken the Hecahands end mode. So I kind of think of this card as sort of a bandage for the deck that can help mitigate the worst outcome of not being able to fusion summon the Yowza. Aside from that, this card can of course also help you go into your other fusion monster as well, which is also important because they have another fusion monster in this set, the Hecahands Dominus. This monster simply requires 2 Hecahands monsters, and it has 2 important effects. Number 1, it can target and steal a monster your opponent control. And number 2, it allows all of your Hecahands fusion monster and monster you control that owned by your opponent to be able to attack directly. This is a gold second card for Hecahands that is now going to be one of the main win conditions, because just this card on the board plus the Yowza will almost always represent lethal damage when used in combination with monsters owned by your opponent. This effect allows you to bypass tower monsters or ignore monsters with high attack points in general, which is something that this deck definitely struggles with. This monster is now also a consistent way for Hecahands to steal an opponent monster for when they are going second, and doesn't have to rely on random effects or monsters that are hard to summon. The final card for Hecahands is the continuous trap with Hecahands. This card allows you to tribute a Hecahand monster or a monster not owned by your opponent to take control of a monster your opponent controls, but you do have to send a card you control to the grave during your end phase. Not much to really say here, this is just another end mode piece for Hecahands that is pretty optional to play. It is not as good as the other two traps, but it will give you continuous value if it is left on the field. Probably still not worth it to play for that draw in your deck. Overall, the 3 new cards here for Hecahands expand the toolbox a little bit, giving the deck a real valid win condition and help make the gameplay a little bit more consistent. It is still gonna be hard for this deck to stand out in the meta, but this support do look promising. Next is the 3 Enneacraft cards, which is a new pair of Pendulum monster and 1 new spell. Now if you haven't read an Enneacraft card before, then this deck might be a little bit hard to grasp with the excessively long paragraph, but this is actually a pretty straightforward deck when you actually play with it. This archetype is an interesting mix between using flip monster in tandem with the pendulum mechanic. They all share the same effect to reveal themselves from your hand to special summon any monster from your hand in face down defense position. So they can fill the board with a lot of flip monsters that have interesting effects that activate even when face down. There are only 3 types of cards in this deck that you need to remember. The main searcher, your boss monster which will also be your disruptions, and the supporting spells. The searchers in the deck, which are the pyramid looking thingy, are all level 1 Earth Machine with 100 attack and 1000 defense. They all have the same pendulum effect by paying 900 life points to reveal 3 Enneacraft cards from your deck, and your opponent will add one of them to your hand. So with 4 different pyramid, you can search your deck for up to 4 Enneacraft cards per turn, assuming you can free up the pendulum zone. Moreover, they can also further search you another Enneacraft card if your opponent triggers their effects while they are face down on the field. Because all of the Enneacraft monsters work sort of like a trap card, they flip themselves face up on the field when certain conditions are met. The blue one can flip itself up when your opponent activates an effect to special summon a monster. The red one is when your opponent activates a monster effect in the hand, so that could be a really good card to use against hand traps. The yellow one can trigger when your opponent activates an effect that can add a card from their deck to their hand, and the green one can trigger when your opponent activates an effect in their grave or banishment. Of course, they also do have a flip effect as well, that provide a disruption corresponding to their trigger condition. And because of how the chain resolve, this effect can be very disruptive. Like for example, the blue one can negate the effect of the monster that they special summon, or the yellow one can randomly banish the card that they just added. So if your opponent triggers one of these monsters, they will become pretty efficient cards, both adding you a card and providing a disruption. The transformation of this pyramid, the big Enneacraft monster on the other hand, doesn't have a search effect, but they have bigger and flashier flip effects that either make a big impact on the board or become a threat that need to be outed. Their trigger effects when they are face down is also very disruptive in their own right, but these are harder to trigger because your opponent can more easily play around them. And for the supporting spell, they are your typical consistent booster and follow-up / recyclement for the deck. There is just a few things that I want to note here. First, the field spell, Enneacraft, is one of the alternative win conditions to the deck, because as you have noticed, all of the Enneacraft monsters can place counter on themselves when they are in the pendulum zone, and this spell can remove those counters during your end phase to inflict 900 damage to your opponent for each. The Enneacraft is also an easy way for the deck to get the skill out of the pendulum zone, which again will help you trigger more search effect for the deck with your small pendulum monsters. Other than that, the Enneacraft Reverse help you to be more proactive with your Enneacraft monsters, and doesn't have to just rely on your opponent to trigger their effects. Now to talk about the actual new cards from this set. It takes a while to get here, but I do think that providing the context of Enneacraft would help you to understand these new cards more easily. The new small pendulum monster, let's just say that this is a silver one, is of course another searcher card like the other small pendulum monsters. It is of course another consistency piece for the deck, but technically it's also raised the number of cards you can search during your turn from 4 to 5. Although it would be hard to get the scale out of your pendulum zone though, because you only have one field spell to do it, and this deck doesn't allow you to special summon any monster except in face down defense position. Aside from that, this card face down on the field can flip itself face up when your opponent activates a card or effect that set a card on the field. And if flip effect allows you to destroy one spell or trap your opponent control, then you can special summon a monster from your hand in face down defense position. A lot of new archetypes use this mechanic to send a card straight from their deck, so this card is basically a free disruption against them. It is not as common of a trigger than some of the other small Enneacraft monsters, so this card is definitely not a priority to get on your board, but if you do know which deck you are playing against and able to use this card disruption, then it could be very powerful. As for the big Enneacraft monster, Fatal Spear. This monster provides a floodgate effect that prevents your opponent from activating any card or effects in response to their own card or effects activation, which is gonna deny chain blocking your Enneacraft monsters, which is gonna be a big part of outplaying an Enneacraft player. To further reinforce this mechanic, this card trigger effects when it is face down on the field is when your opponent activates a card or effects as a chaining 3 or higher, which is something that they can definitely play around. But when it does trigger, this card will negate any opponent effects that happened before this card in the chain. In short, this monster has a very unique form of floodgate and disruption effect, but it is still a very powerful card, and it is gonna be very high on the list on things your opponent need to play around when playing against Enneacraft. The final card is the Enneacraft Reset. This card simply places the Enneapolis in your deck or graveyard face up in your field zone, or if you already control the Enneapolis, you can negate face up cards your opponent control up to the number of cards in your Pendulum Zone instead. So a bit of dual purpose with this card that is good for when you go in first and second. An important thing about this new card is that now with this, you can cut down the number of Enneapolis you need to play in your deck. The field spell is a crucial part of Enneacraft, but it is useless outside the first copy. So playing additional copies of the reset is definitely better than playing additional copies of the field spell. Plus, the card also have an effect in the graveyard that allows you to banish it to flip up to 2 of your Enneacraft monster into face down defense position. This is an amazing effect because none of the Enneacraft monster effect on the field is a hard once per turn. So this card will basically reset 2 of your disruptions on the Enneacraft monsters that are hard for your opponent to play around. And this effect can just be triggered basically when your opponent tries to do anything. So not only is this a great disruptive card, it can also help your Enneacraft monsters to dodge negate effects as well. Okay, let's recap what these 3 new cards is gonna accomplish for Enneacraft. With a new pyramid and a new field spell tutor, the deck is gonna be a lot more clean to build. They have more searchers, and they can cut out extra copies of the field spell. The spider is gonna add an interesting layer of interaction with your opponent. Even if you don't control this monster on the field, your opponent is definitely gonna be cautious about using too many effects in the same chain, just for the fear of this card existing. But that is mostly it. The deck doesn't get anything crazy good that will push it over the top, just more of what already there. Kewl Tune will complete the Phantom Revenge support with 1 new main deck monster and 2 new synchro monster. Compared to the previous 2 archetypes, this one is a lot more straightforward. It is more or less your typical run-off-the-mill synchro deck, but with an extra gimmick. Every single monster in the archetype, including the synchro monsters, are all tuners, and all synchro monsters only require tuners to make, which sort of break the rule of synchro summoning, but functionality it doesn't really make much of a difference. This is mostly done just as a flavor and as a way to put some restriction on what monster they can actually summon, because all of the main deck Kewl Tune monster allow you to use tuner monster in your hand as a synchro material. This would be completely broken if it weren't for the fact that they themselves are also tuners, which means that they can really only summon monster from their own archetype. Their main form of disruption will be through their main deck monster themselves that all have an effect that trigger when they are being used as a synchro material, like destroy a monster or a spell trap or banish a monster from the action deck. The synchro monsters also do have this 1-for-1 trade type of effect, like negating a card on the field or copy a disruption effect of a monster in your graveyard that can use that effect when they are being used as a synchro material. So I would say that this deck is a pretty fair mid-rangey kind of deck that more or less trade card evenly with their opponent and doesn't really rely on any one thing to win them the game. The one thing that is really prompting this deck up in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the Kewl Tune clip that has an effect to special summon itself from your hand and synchro summon during the opponent's turn, which allow for turn 0 disruption from the synchro monster you summon and from the synchro material that was sent to the grave for the synchro summon itself. Let's see how the new support can elevate this gameplay. Let's start with the Kewl Tune Rotary. This is a level 1 Cyber's tuner monster. During your turn, this card in your hand can be revealed to allow you an additional normal summon of a tuner monster. The best way to benefit from this effect would be to normal summon the Kewl Tune Mix and the Kewl Tune Rico, which will search for a Kewl Tune monster, or normal summon the Kewl Tune Q, which will special summon the tuner monster from your deck. And the last effect of Rotary is the effect it has when it is sent to the grave as a synchro material. You can choose to search for 1 Kewl Tune spell or trap from your deck to your hand, which is certainly a very useful effect during your turn, more so than any other Kewl Tune monsters. Also, you just randomly get to look at your opponent's hands for some reason. Or if you want to choose a disruptive effect, you can place a card from your opponent's graveyard to the bottom of the deck. So this is a very nice extender for Kewl Tune that also have a little bit of utility disruption that they definitely wouldn't mind playing a couple of copies of. Next we have the Kewl Tune Crackle, which will be the synchro version of Clip. This level 5 synchro monster obviously requires Clip to make, plus another tuner, which will be your level 3 tuner, Kewl Tune Rico or Kewl Tune Q. Alternatively, you can also use a hand trap like Ash Blossom. Playing off a Clip synchro effect, Crackle has a very anti-extra deck effect where when it is synchro summoned, you can look at the opponent's extra deck and banish 1 card from it until the end phase, and this card gains the attack of the banished monster. And if this synchro summon card leaves the field, you get to look and banish 2 more cards from their extra deck until the end phase. This is a very situational card that can be really good against some archetype and absolutely useless against some others. You sometimes can summon this monster just because it can have really big attacks, so it can help you clear up the opponent's monster or go for lethal damage. This still depends on what your opponent have in their actual deck though, so this is definitely not very consistent. Even when your opponent is going first, this is probably not gonna get summoned a lot, unless you know for sure that using this effect will completely cripple the opponent's deck, which is very rare. I think you just more rather going into some of your more consistent disruptions. The final monster for Kewl Tune is the biggest boss monster they have so far, Kewl Tune back to back. This is a level 10 Dogfiend monster with 3200 attack points and 0 defense, and it is of course also a tuner. This one has a little bit more of a normal requirement, as it just requires a tuner and just one or more synchro monster to make, which can also be non-tuners, so definitely more easy to make in decks that aren't Kewl Tune. But for Kewl Tune, the option you have to make this monster are by using any two of your level 5 synchro monsters, using the Track Maker combined with the Loudest War, or by using the Chainbound Dragon with one level 3 Kewl Tune monster. The Kewl Tune back-to-back have some really powerful passive effects on the field. It increases the level of all monsters your opponent control by 2, which can screw up any synchro or XZ-focused archetype. Pretty much a 9-win button if this deck doesn't have a way to deal with this monster. The Kewl Tune RS already have this type of effect, but it is a lot more narrow, so you can really rely on this to win you the game. But you can with the back-to-back. This other passive effect allows all of your tuners to attack twice during each battle phase. So on your turn, this card represents a huge lethal threat, allowing all of your Kewl Tune monster, along with any other synchro tuner you have, to dish out absurd damage number. And even if you don't have lethal with this card, this is also just a really efficient tool to clean up the opponent's board. For its actual activated effect on the board, whenever your opponent activates a monster effect, you can target one tuner monster in your grave or banishment, except a level 10 monster, and either add it to your hand or special summon it to your board, and then you can immediately synchro summon the monster. Now, one monster you get from this effect isn't gonna be enough for synchro summon now, is it? Which is why you can use this effect back-to-back. Back-to-back. Well, twice per turn. So in short, this monster guarantees you at least one synchro summon during either player's turn if your opponent activates at least 2 monster effects, and more if you have enough resources in your hand or field. Do keep in mind that just synchro summoning in this deck gives you disruptive effects, so this card could be think of as a very flexible disruption, giving you the Kewl Tune monster you need for the right situation. Plus, this effect is also really good to recycle your banished Kewl Tune monster, which is something that this deck was lacking before. Overall, a very powerful boss monster for Kewl Tune that seriously level up their game. All 3 of these new cards here are all filling a gap in Kewl Tune gameplay that they were missing. So now this is a pretty well-rounded deck that is well equipped to deal with a lot of different archetypes. Out of the 3 archetypes from Phantom Revenge that are getting support in this set, Kewl Tune is definitely the big winner here, with the most well-rounded support that cover a lot of their weakness and give them new tools to counter different strategies. Plus, the biggest support from this set for Kewl Tune is the Fidraulis Harmonia, which is definitely a card that they need to push it over the edge. While Hecahands and Enneacraft new cards is more so to complete the fantasy of the archetype and help them to be a little bit better at what they were already doing. Hecahands doesn't gain a lot in terms of power from this set, so they're still gonna be very matchup dependent. Enneacraft is still a very passive and a reactive deck, so while the deck do offer interesting and unique gameplay, you do lack a bit of agency while playing Enneacraft. Of course, it wouldn't be a major yugioh set without a low archetype in it now, would it? The 3 main archetypes of the Medius lore, including Artmage, DoomZ, and Elfnotes or Elfnotes, are all getting a big boost with Blazing Dominion. They each will receive at least one new powerful card, and a new version of each power patron that work well with each individual archetype, plus some general support and payoff for the power patron monsters. In total, there will be 10 new cards for the entire Medius lore. So, let's get right into it. Artmage is getting the new counter trap, Artmage Impact Recapture. This card can be activated the turn it was set if you control an Artmage monster, and it simply negates a monster effect by banishing an Artmage fusion monster you control until the end phase. And if you control 3 monsters of different types, then you also get to return all spell and trap your opponent control back to their hand. This card can be easily enabled by using the Artmage Non Finito, which will both set this card from your deck and allow it to reactivate right away. Not only will this trap allow Artmage to be played better under some hand trap like the Biru, it also gives the deck another powerful endwork pieces that it was sorely missing. An important card for the Artmage toolkit going forward. DoomZ is getting a new Graflario XZ monster and the new equipped spell Adrastea. The new Graflario is a rank 5 win machine that takes 3 level 5 monsters to make. But you wouldn't need to do that, because you can also XZ summon this card by using a DoomZ XZ monster you control. This monster is gonna be an important setup card for the deck, as it can search for a DoomZ spell or trap by detaching a material, and it will special summon a non-XZ DoomZ monster from your deck or graveyard when it is destroyed by a card effect, which DoomZ loves to do. Your one-card Medius combo in DoomZ is now much better, with Clefairy can now overlay over the Arcturus to search for one of your key DoomZ spell, and it also helps summon the Dratrius much easier, because it can also tutor for one of your DoomZ monster that you need. Not to mention that this card is also not a bad going second or as a follow-up tool either, because it can also destroy a card on the field on its detached effect, and it can also recycle a DoomZ monster from your graveyard. Truly the custom card that they need to transform this rather mediocre archetype into an absolute powerhouse. That's not all. DoomZ is also getting the new equip spell, Adrastea. This spell protects the equipped monster from being destroyed by battle only once per turn. This effect of the card is mostly done for flavor, referencing Archmage Clefairy effect, which also cannot be destroyed by battle only once per turn. The main effect of this card would be to destroy the equipped monster to special summon one DoomZ monster from your hand, graveyard or banishment in defense position. Also important, you can equip this card from your grave to one of your monsters you control, then take damage equal to its level or rank times 100. First, you can think of this card as sort of an extender / enabler for DoomZ, because you won't get to summon a monster plus the DoomZ monster themselves all have effect when they are being destroyed. It's not always gonna line up perfectly with this card, because the monster destruction effect are also the same effect that share when they are being summoned. So this card might not get a lot of value during the first turn, but it will get much better later on in the game, because its second effect allows you to recycle it multiple times, as long as you have the life points to pay for it. So this card gives DoomZ a lot of grind game value just by itself, which fixes one of the fundamental weaknesses of the deck. Also, another important aspect about this card, your main deck DoomZ monster need to have an equipped spell equipped on them to be able to special summon the XZ monster from your extra deck. So this card fixes another problem with DoomZ, giving the deck an easy access equipped spell that they can always use to enable their effects. So now, DoomZ won't need to run an excessive amount of equipped spell in the deck just to make sure that they don't have a weak follow-up. DoomZ is gonna need all the help it can get, and these two cards definitely do not disappoint. The Medius support so far has been very impactful, and Elfnotes is no different. The card they are getting is Elfnotes Regina, which is also gonna be a core part of Elfnotes deck going forward, because this is another starter for the deck. You can send one of the Elfnotes card from your hand, or that is face up on your field to the graveyard, to special summon this card from your hand. And if this card is special summoned to your center main monster zone, you can special summon one Elfnotes monster from your deck. Special summoning a monster from your deck is always gonna be good, so there isn't really much to say here. There is just a few things that is worth noting with this card. First of all, any effects that is a quick effect like this one is always gonna have additional benefits to them. In Elfnotes specifically, because they are the main deck monster or have destructive effect during the opponent's turn, Elfnotes Regina is basically gonna be an exclusive hand trap to this archetype. Although you should be careful by using this card as a hand trap for when you're going second, because it is gonna cost you a lot of resources. You are losing a card from your hand, and the monster you summon won't be able to give you any additional resources unless they can stick around until your turn. So these monsters really need to have a big impact with their disruption so that this play is worth it. Alternatively, this monster can also be used to dodge targeting effects on your Elfnotes cards, with classic example of like Imperm or Vellum. One other interesting thing that this card can do for Elfnotes is that because it doesn't care about the center main monster zone, this monster can send the monster that is occupied in that zone to the graveyard, basically free up that zone for other Elfnotes monsters for their effects. Regina's second effect simply allows you to add it back to your hand if it was used as a synchro material. So it can be used as a starter during your turn, and then add it back to your hand to be used as a disruption during the opponent's turn. Yeah, the card is just nuts. And if that weren't enough, Elfnotes is also getting the help of the Fidraulis Harmonia. So needless to say, Synchro Archetypes has been the big winner of the set so far. And of course, each archetype is getting a new version of the Power Patron monster that not only work well with each individual decks, but also seem to be building up to be their own strategy as well. These are all level 10 Dark Pendulum monsters that have 300 attacks and 200 defense, and have a scale of 1, and each of them is always treated as a card from their own archetype. The Verdo for Archmage, the Grado for DoomZ, and Junodo for Elfnotes. The one key thing that all of these monsters share is that they can help bring out their corresponding Big Boss Power Patron monster by just simply banish the top 3 cards of your deck face down while you control this monster on the field. Very much a worthwhile trade for these archetypes, considering that it is not a trivial task to summon these boss monsters. Aside from that, these Power Patron monsters are also extender, helping you to get more cards from their own archetype or help you chain into more Power Patron monsters if they are added to the extra deck face up. Shadow Beast Novato for Archmage will special summon an Archmage or Power Patron monster from your deck or your face up extra deck. Shadow Machine Zogrado for DoomZ is gonna add a Power Patron or DoomZ spell trap from your deck to your hand. And the Shadow Spirit Junodo will add an Elfnotes or a Power Patron card from your graveyard or from your face up extra deck to your hand. How you will get this monster into the extra deck is varied and depending on the archetype. Like for example, for Archmage you can fusion summon with the Novato, or for DoomZ you can destroy the Zogrado with your various effects. The pendulum effects of these monsters provide some utility that is not only useful to the corresponding archetype, it is also another way to help get the card into the extra deck. The Shadow Beast in the photo can negate an opponent monster effect that is activating in response to your Archmage or your Power Patron monster effect, then destroy this card in your scale. This effect will work like a Rizio Cross and will negate the effect at resolution, so your opponent cannot chain link block this card. Still, this effect is not too useful to Archmage on their first turn, because their number 1 monster that the opponent would want to stop is the Medius the Pure, which is not either an Archmage or a Power Patron card, so this card cannot protect it against effects like Ash or Imperm. So this card is not really going to be used as a pendulum scale, unless you have extra copy of the card in your hand, in which case, this effect might sometimes be useful to prevent the opponent to respond to your Archmage monster effects. I would say that the one interesting thing about this effect in Archmage is that Nerva, the Power Patron of Creation, can change an Archmage monster effect into a bolt wipe, which need to be the direction linked to your Archmage monster effect. So if your opponent wants to prevent the bolt wipe from happening, they need to change their own effects into the opposing Archmage monster effects. And if they are using a monster effect to stop the Nerva in this instant, then your Shadow Beast will gain value out of negating that monster effect. So that can put the opponent into a damn if you do, damn if you don't type of situation. Moving on to the Shadow Machines of Gretel, its scale effect allows you to destroy itself and a DoomZ or a Power Patron monster in your hand or face-up field. Then you can also destroy one card on the field. This effect makes this the easiest Power Patron monster that can get itself into the extra deck to trigger its other effect to search for a Power Patron or a DoomZ spell or trap. So, among its other benefits, like enabling your other DoomZ monster effect that trigger when they are being destroyed, or to be used as a flexible wall breaker tool, this is gonna be a very good card for DoomZ, giving the deck even more redundancy with their searchers. And finally, for the Junodo, this monster scale effect allows you to destroy itself, to draw 2 cards and then discard a card if any Power Patron or Elfnote monster is special summoned to your field. Another card here that can easily get itself into the extra deck to trigger its effect to recycle you a Power Patron or an Elfnote card. So quite a good value card for Elfnote, helping the deck join to more of their engines or hand traps, including new powerful hand trap that this deck will run, like the Fidraulis Harmonia as we've discussed. So all 3 of these monsters already provide a lot of value for their own archetype, and definitely a card that this archetype will want to play. But if you want to use the effect to summon the big boss monster, then you need to summon this monster to your field. The best way to do that is of course through Medius the Pure, but there are also some new cards here that will also help you with this. These new Power Patron cards synergize specifically with the Power Patron monster that we just looked at. The Unleashed Power Patron Portal Terminus can send 1 Power Patron monster from your deck or extra deck to your graveyard, then you can add 1 Dark Fairy monster from your deck to your hand, which is a pretty generic pool of monsters. But for the sake of these archetypes here, let's just say that you're only adding Medius to Pure with this. The spell effect in the grave allows you to banish face down a monster that battle with your Power Patron monster. Certainly a powerful removal effect in certain situations, but of course the main reason for this card is that it is extra copies of Medius the Pure. The No Power Patron Realm Vidria field spell can reveal 1 Power Patron monster from your extra deck, banish 1 card from your hand face down, and then add to your hand or special summon 1 monster from your deck that mentioned the reveal monster. This is another card that allows you to tutor for any Power Patron monster you want, albeit with a bit of a steep cost. But if you're looking for more redundancy in your deck, this card could fill that purpose. The one nice thing about this card in this phase is that this effect can be activated every single turn, so it will give you extra value if it sticks around on the board. On the field, this card has a continuous effect that makes all of your opponent monsters lose 100 attack for each banished cards. This does include all of your opponent banished cards as well, so between that and all of your Power Patron monster also do banished card from your deck, this could be a very annoying effect for your opponent to deal with. And finally, this card has a crazy floodgate effect that disables all card effects in your opponent's graveyard if you control all 3 Power Patron boss monsters. This can completely kill some archetypes like Dracotail, but of course, the setup here is not easy. You definitely cannot do it with any single archetype, and will need to run a hybrid type of deck that run all 3 of the Power Patron that cheat out the boss monsters. In which case, this card will be your payoff for playing that strategy. And that's not all. Let's take a look at another payoff card for the Power Patron monsters. Vidrium, the Power Patron of Chaos Extermination. The image that I got here shows the wrong level of the monster, but this is a level 12 Pendulum monster with 5000 attack and 0 defense. This monster has a scale of 11, which can be relevant because the other Power Patron monster all have scale 1 and are all level 10, so you can actually Pendulum summon with this card and any other Power Patron monster in your scale. Vidrium's scale effect allows you to destroy itself to either special summon 1 Power Patron monster from your hand or graveyard, or make it so that all of your Power Patron whose original level is 12 gain 5000 attack this turn. The first effect helps you extend with Power Patron monsters, and the second effect can help you push lethal with this card by making it a 10,000 attack monster. But more than that, this second effect have another important function to help you get this card into your actual deck, because you can always activate this effect without any requirement. While in order to activate the first effect, you do need to have a Power Patron monster in your hand or graveyard. The reason you would want to do this is because when this card is added to your actual deck face up, you can add one Power Patron card from your deck to your hand. So even more redundancy searcher for the Medius lore that can not only search for your other Power Patron monster, it can also search for the previous Power Patron spell that we looked at to bridge into cards like Medius the Pure. And vice versa, the Dominus spell can also search for this monster because it is a Dark Fairy monster. Plus, the spell will also send a Power Patron monster from your deck to your graveyard, which the Vitrium can revolt with this scale effect. So a lot of value can be gained from this card with this sequencing. This alone should be enough of a reason to want to run this card in any of your Medius lore archetype, especially since you already want to run the Dominus spell. The rest of the card effects is gonna be the less relevant part about this card, because they are mostly there as a payoff for the hybrid archetype. This card can be special summoned from your grave or actual deck by returning one fusion, synchro and XZ monster from your field or graveyard back to your actual deck. And when this card is special summoned by its own effect, you can banish all cards from any graveyard face down. Plus, as a little cherry on top, this monster will be unaffected by every monster effect except Power Patron monster when it is on the field. So a lot of cool payoff effect for the mono Power Patron deck or the hybrid low archetype, which mode is not going to be very competitive because they are either too weak or just auto lose to the more chommies. But they do seem to be very fun strategies if you want to try them with this card and make it your main win condition. The support for all of the Medius lore archetypes from Blazing Dominion do seem to complete this deck from a gameplay perspective. The new cards that the three main archetypes receive all help to cover the gap in each of their play pattern and make playing them much more fluid. This doesn't necessarily mean that they will be good, but they are definitely a lot better. The big winner out of the three is no doubt Elfnotes, which not only received the best card out of this support, they are also getting the Fidraulis Harmonia. It's like beating a dead horse at this point by mentioning this card, but what can I say? The card is just too good. On the flip side, the Power Patron monsters are very good support for their own individual archetype, but as their own package that meant to be played together, they are definitely lacking. So right now, this is purely just gonna be a gimmick deck and nothing else. The hybrid archetype between these three decks, which is now possible thanks to this new Power Patron card though, do seem like a bit of fun. But worry not, we still might get more Power Patron card in the future as well. Judging from the art alone, it seems like we are not done with the Medius lore just yet. Okay, now we are at the final stretch of the pack. If you made it this far, consider subscribing to my channel and give this video a little like. I'd really appreciate it. What were your favorite card or archetype from this set? Let me know in the comment. And then, there were one. This set has been a lot of legacy support so far, but there will be one new archetype that I'm pretty excited about. Please welcome Clown Clan. This is gonna be a control archetype that is focused around the tributing mechanic and will gain value out of tributing monsters of different card types, like Fusion or XZ. 10 cards in total will be released in Blazing Dominion for Clown Clan, and there is a mixed bag of card types here. They only have one main deck monster that they can normal summon, which is the Clown Clan Whiteface. So this monster is the main enabler of the deck, doing a lot of the tributing for them. The thing that makes Clown Clan different from other tribute archetypes is that they are mostly gonna use extra deck monster as tribute fodder for them. There is a Clown Clan monster for each of the summoning mechanic, and their first batch of cards will have a synchro, a fusion, and an XZ monster. This monster will be special summoned throughout the card from the archetype, so their summoning requirement isn't too important here. They all have some small effect on the field that benefit your tribute summon monster. Clown Clan Media, make it so that your opponent cannot activate any cards or effects when you tribute summon a monster. Clown Clan Diablo, make your tribute summon monster attacks deal double piercing battle damage. And Clown Clan Devils, give your tribute summon monster 1000 attack boost. This is mostly to help you close out the game. But the main purpose of this monster is that they are the setup piece for the deck, plus they have a pretty nasty counter effect to each of the summoning mechanic. If these monsters are tributed, you can activate one of these two effects to either return all monsters on the field and in the graveyard back to the actual deck with the corresponding card type of the monster you tributed, or to advance your gameplay by setting a Clown Clan spell or trap from your deck, or recycle one of your Clown Clan cards from your graveyard. So, this monster will be the main interacting point with other archetypes, providing a very strong form of removal that A can be very easily chain blocked by your other monster that you're also tributing, or by the tribute monster itself, and B is gonna completely remove all threat from a single card type that your opponent have. So let's go back to the enabler of the deck here, the Clown Clan Whiteface. This is a level 7 light illusion monster with 25,000 attack and defense, so it has pretty decent stats and require 2 monsters for each tribute summon. Of course, in this deck, you want to tribute as many monsters as you can, But in case you don't have enough resource for it, you can also tribute summon this monster by tributing only one Synchro Fusion or Z monster, etc. When this card is tribute summoned, you can either draw cards equal to the number of monsters you tributed, or you can negate the effects of face-up card on the field by the same amount. So even more incentive to tribute as many monsters as you can. And on the field, it also allows you to tribute summon during the opponent's turn. Very much a key card for Clown Clan, giving you a lot of resource when it is tribute summoned, and turn your other Clown Clan monster into disruption play during the opponent's turn. Now, summoning this monster from the extra deck will be the job of these 3 spell and trap cards. The most basic one will be the Clown Clan Malabarism, which will special summon up to 2 Clown Clan monsters from your deck or extra deck, ignoring the summoning condition. The Clown Clan cards with this summoning effect will also disallow you to activate effects of monsters that special summon from the deck or extra deck for the next 2 turns, to make sure that they only get used within the archetype and doesn't get used to enable a combo. It also has an effect in the graveyard that can be used during the same turn that it was sent there, that allows you to banish it from the graveyard, tribute a monster from your hand or field, then target a card on the field and return it to the hand. So a pretty strong effect that both enable your other Clown Clan monster and removing a threat on the board. Next is the Clown Clan Matinee, which is a continuous spell that only special summon 1 Clown Clan monster from your deck or extra deck instead of 2 like the Malabarism, so more focused on having consistent value. Now, just summoning 1 Clown Clan monster is not ideal for this deck, but this card definitely made up for it with a second effect, which is also one of the crazier part about this archetype. During the end phase, you can draw cards equal to the number of monsters of different card types that you have tributed during this turn, like Fusion or Z for example. Then you can also set 1 spell or trap from your hand. So not only is this a potential way for the deck to draw a lot of cards, it also helps you to set up a disruption from the cards that you've drawn, like an Imperp or a Dominus trap for example. Last is the Clown Clan Soleil. This card has a dual purpose during the opponent's turn. It can either special summon 2 Clown Clan monsters from your deck or extra deck, or it can add a Clown Clan monster from your deck to your hand. So it can give you tribute fodder during the opponent's turn, or to search for the Clown Clan white face that you need to tribute your monster. It also has an effect in the grave that allows you to tribute summon a Clown Clan monster, which is gonna be especially useful if you don't have a Clown Clan white face on the field, or if its effect is negated. Otherwise, it is still useful as an extra tribute summon. Now for the starter and consistency card for the deck, we have Clown Clan Flare and Clown Clan Rehearsal. These 2 cards will usually be paired together as a starter package. The Clown Clan Flare will be the ritual monster for the deck, and like the other Clown Clan monster from different summoning mechanic, this monster also has an anti-ritual effect that will shuffle all ritual monsters on the field and in the graveyard back into the deck when it is tributed. Its other tribute effect is also equally disruptive, as it will non-target change 1 effects monster on the field into face-down defense position. But like I've said, this is mainly gonna be a starter for the deck, as you can reveal it from your hand to add a Clown Clan card from your deck to your hand, then discard a card. The other Clown Clan card you want to be searching for is the Clown Clan Rehearsal. This card will tribute a monster from your hand or field to search for a Clown Clan white face and another Clown Clan spell trap, so it will basically give you everything you need to set up a Clown Clan board. Additionally, it can banish yourself from the grave to ritual summon your Clown Clan Flare, which gives you another monster on the field from the ritual card type that you can tribute summon with. Both effects of this card do include tributing a monster, so not only is this a great starter card for the deck, it can also help enable a lot of your Clown Clan monsters. The last Clown Clan card will be the Clown Clan New Face. This card can target 3 Clown Clan cards from your grave or banishment, shuffle them into the deck and then draw a card only during the standby phase. If you tribute summon a monster, you can target other spell trap on the field equal to the number of monsters you tributed and then destroy them. Also, if this card is sent to the graveyard except from the field, you can place it face up on your field. So this card definitely have a lot of good effect going for it. It can continuously recycle your card and give you a bit of value, and it gives Clown Clan a way to deal with the back row. A very solid card for a control strategy like this, even if the card is not core to the Clown Clan gameplay. So overall, this is a 2-card setup kind of deck. You have your main tributor, and you have a card to summon your tribute fodder. Then the Clown Clan white face plus your fodder will help set up your value engine and your disruption. And your main defender of the deck during your opponent's turn will be your Clown Clan white face, tributing more of your fodder for the disruptive effect, which is more or less how the deck was meant to be played with their cards. But with tribute deck like this, there is always gonna be some nasty monsters that they can abuse. And in this case, the most egregious example would be the vanity monsters that give the deck a very big win condition that they obviously didn't meant to have. But also, cards like this has been in the game for a long time, and they just needed a deck like this to truly make them broken. Okay, besides the current floodgate issue that this deck represents, what are the standing here with the deck? Well, this deck is a new take on the tributing mechanic, using mostly monsters from the extra deck as tribute fodder for them, so they don't need to run the monster in their main deck, which free up a lot of space for non-engine. the deck also have access to one of the best removal effects ever. Basically, it's a nuke button for any single one card type. And I am expecting this mechanic to be expanded for the deck, as they have yet to receive their Link monster, which should also have a similar sort of effect. But even now, the deck is already very efficient at what it's trying to do, and can put out some pretty absurd results. As a demonstration, I will show you a combo that utilizes the Clown Clan engine to their full potential. What's this? A Nouvelle card? Yes, just this one card will result you in a draw 8 combo with Clown Clan. How is that possible? Well, let's see. The Cuisine spell is a starter for Nouvelle to summon their level 1 Peruru monster. This monster is actually a starter for Clown Clan, because it can tutor for any level 1 ritual monster, which will be your Clown Clan Flare. From here it will be the more basic of the Clown Clan combo. You use Flare effect to search for your Rehearsal, and then discard herself to the grave. The Rehearsal is full setup for Clown Clan, tributing your level 1 Nouvelle to search for your Clown Clan Whiteface and Calabarism. This will trigger your Nouvelle to put herself in the scale, and you can use Calabarism to special summon exactly the Synchro and the Xe monster from your extra deck. You will now tribute summon Clown Clan Whiteface using your 2 monsters on the field, and this will trigger a lot of effects. Whiteface himself will draw you 2 cards. The Synchro monster will add you back the Clown Clan Flare from your graveyard. Your Xe will set a Clown Clan spell from your deck, which will be your Matinee. After everything resolved, you can now use your Matinee to summon the last Clown Clan monster from your extra deck, which is the Fusion monster. Now, using the Rehearsal effect in your grave, you can ritual summon the Clown Clan Flare that you just added back to your hand by attributing the Fusion monster, which will trigger its effect to set a trap from your deck. Oh, but we are not done just yet. The Nouvelle monster in your scale can special summon herself by changing the battle position of a monster on the field. And now you can use the Nouvelle monster itself to summon the Link Kuriboh, which also has synergy in this deck because it does have a tribute effect. But the reason that we are summoning it here is that because it is a Link monster, and that is a monster type that we are missing that we haven't tributed yet this turn. But wait, we are out of effects to tribute a monster, right? Wrong. We have another secret effects up our sleeve, that is the Nova, the Power Patron of Creation. This monster actually has an effect to special summon itself by attributing 3 monsters you control with different types. This effect never really comes up, but it's really perfect for Clown Clan. On this mode, you can summon Nova by attributing all 3 monsters you control. And now, get ready for the firework. We are entering our end phase to trigger the Matinee effect, and it will draw you 6 cards. Yeah, that's right, 6 cards. Because we have tributed every single card type that is mentioned on the Matinee this turn. All of the Clown Clan monsters, plus the Nouvelle and the Link Kuriboh. And just to remind you, this is all started with just 1 card. And with just that card, we have drew 8 other cards this turn. 2 from the Whiteface and 6 from the Matinee. Doesn't sound like a bad deal to me. Well, looks like Nouvelle stock are up with Clown Clans, boys. And that is gonna be all of the major supported archetypes from Blazing Dominion. The rest of the cards is either gonna be pack filler or small support for random archetypes. So let's quickly go over them to close out the video. First, we have the Assault Mode cards, with Red Dragon Assault Mode that is very in theme for the pack, and the Assault Sonic Warrior. Red Nova Assault Mode is the new payoff for the Assault Mode engine. If your opponent activates a card or effect, you can banish this card until the end phase to banish cards your opponent control up to the number of tuners in your graveyard. You can also banish yourself until the end phase to negate a monster attack and end the battle phase. And with these Assault Mode monsters, this one also has an effect to summon the Synchro version of the card, the Red Nova Dragon in your graveyard when it is destroyed. In terms of the Assault Mode boss monsters, this one is not the best, but it's certainly not the worst either. Still, this monster is not enough of a compelling reason for you to want to run the Assault Mode engine, unless it is specifically for the Red Dragon Archfiend deck that play a lot of tuners and naturally run the Red Nova Dragon. It could be a fun option to play in your Red Dragon Archfiend deck, but you definitely need to finesse your deck building process. The other Assault Mode card will be the Assault Sonic Warrior. This card has a hybrid effect that makes it playable in both Young deck and the Assault Mode engine, where if you control a Young Warrior, an Assault Mode activate, or a card that mentions either of them, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if this card is summoned, you can add a Synchron monster or an Assault Mode activate from your deck to your hand. This could be a very good extender in the Young Synchron deck that you might want to play a copy of in that deck, but it's probably not gonna make much of a difference for the Assault Mode engine. That is not to say the Assault Mode engine is a bad engine at all. The new cards are absolutely insane. It's just that decks haven't had an excuse to play this card at the moment because they are a big deck slot commitment, and the decks that this engine was meant to be played with, like Synchron or Resonator, is already having a deck building problem. This card does fill up a gap spot in the Assault Mode engine, being a level 2 monster that can special summon itself and can search for one of the better Synchron monsters, like the Revolution Synchron or the Assault Synchron. It's not gonna be a thing to elevate this engine to another level just yet, but it is a piece to the puzzle that we are slowly solving. And speaking of Synchron, we do have a new spell in Blazing Dominion for them. Junk Signal is a flexible quick play spell that either can tribute a monster to special summon a Junk Warrior, a Stardust Dragon, or a monster that mentions either of them from your hand, deck, or graveyard to your field. Or it can be used to negate the effect of an opponent card that activates in response to your Synchro monster effect. Not much to say except this is a very good card for Synchron. It's a starter / extender that can also be used to dodge effects on the field. Plus, it protects your most vulnerable choke point in the Junk Synchron deck, that is the Junk Speeder, against literally every hand trap in the game. We actually do already have this card in Masteru as a part of their anniversary, and it's already doing work for the Junk Synchron deck. And here we have another card that was already released in Masteru, Breachboro Dragon. He was released along his other friends from Burst Protocol, also in the anniversary pack, that helped to make Rocket a much more in-theme archetype rather than just a Dragon Link deck that just have a bunch of random dragons in them. So now we can definitively refer to this deck as Rocket. And with that, Breachboro is gonna be a key extra deck piece for Rocket. When it is link summoned, you can search your deck for Boro spell or trap, and it has a quick effect to target a dark monster you control, it gains 500 attacks, or if that monster is no longer on the field, you can special summon one Rocket monster from your deck in defense position. Now there will be a few Rocket Dragons that will destroy themselves when they are being targeted by a link monster, so this effect is only meant to be used with those monsters specifically. This is a really powerful extender effect that is a bit dependent on other cards in your deck to activate it. But in short, this is gonna be the best Link 2 monster for Rocket, that is gonna be an important middle ground to help you go into your bigger Link monsters. The other thing that is nice about this card is that it has very good arrow to help activate your God Dragon Kisti with minimal resources. And it's also a consistent way to search for the Boro reboot, which is gonna be a very powerful angle piece. The only thing that Rocket is missing now is the Overframe card to push it over the top. This is very random, but Mimiku is getting a new card here, the Mimiku Flower, which I do think is a very good card for Mimiku that they will like a heck of a lot. This card flip effect will be for your opponent to add a flip monster or a Mimiku card from their deck to their hand, and of course to switch control of this monster. This card in your hand is also gonna be a pretty good card for Mimiku, because besides the effect to set itself to the opponent's field, it can also special summon itself to your field if there is a face down defense position monster on the field, which is a level 1 body to help this deck make a rank 1 XZ. This monster will now be the best target for you to choose with your Mimiku Maker alongside the Archfiend. Before, you would have to choose the Mimiku Dragon as one of your targets for the Mimiku Maker, which is a pretty bad card to give to your opponent on the first turn. So now the Mimiku Flower will basically guarantee you to have a good result with your Maker. Besides that, this card can also search for any flip monster in the game, which is a scary notion to have for Mimiku. And oh hey, they are printing new generic flip support too? What a surprise! The Wake Up Kuro is the latest monster from a series of wind flip monster themed around some sort of beverage that has been gradually released over the recent sets. This card was definitely meant to be played with its associating package, so it's kinda hard to judge it in a vacuum, especially if there are even more cards that is yet to be released for this engine. But judging from the text alone, this card does seem to be a very important card for that deck, being a searcher for any wind flip monster and can dynamically change the position of a monster on the field. As the old archetype, the Wake Up monster is definitely not good on their own, but they can be a good supporting engine for other flip archetypes, like the Mimiku for example. The flip mechanic is definitely a hard mechanic to design for and to balance around. You could be either doing nothing, or you could be abusing an annoying card like the Vacuum Weasel to ruin someone's day. Okay, only a few stragglers left. These are mostly gonna be generic pack fillers, but that doesn't mean they don't have their own use case or deck that they can go into. Cherubidam Erisphia is a generic rank 8 Light Fairy monster that can overlay itself over any XZ monster you control that hasn't activated its effect in the monster zone yet. It will give your XZ monster attacks equal to their ranks times 100 during the battle phase, and it can also protect itself from destruction by detaching a material from any monster you control. The point of this card is mostly to be a middle step that will help you to get into your more impactful XZ monster, like a Zeus or an Antimatter Dragon for example. The card definitely feels like a luxury option for the extra deck, because a lot of decks can't even run a lot of the cards that they want in their extra deck. But in decks that do want to have this option, then this card will be a very good card in them. Next, Lahamu, the Messenger of the Sacred Scripture, a generic Link 2 Dark Fairy monster that will allow you to normal summon a level 5 or higher monster without chibiting. Plus, as a quick effect, it allows you to normal summon a level 5 or higher dark monster only during the main phase. The last effect of the card allows you to place any number of monsters in your hand at the bottom of your deck and then draw the same number of cards during your end phase. So this card does provide a lot of interesting utility. During your turn, it can help you get out a high level monster without cheating, which can be beneficial for a few archetypes. Bonus point if it's a dark monster, because with a second effect, you can essentially get an extra normal summon for the turn. And of course, with quick effect like this, there are some creative use cases where you can use this to dodge targeting effects on your monsters by attributing them away. The end phase mulligan effect of the card is also pretty powerful, getting rid of that card in your hand like the Mochamis, in the hope of drawing more useful hand traps. Just from this set, this card can already be very useful in a deck like the Power Vision deck, where they have a lot of high level dark monsters that they would love to get out of their hand. It is still a pretty niche card, but it can pop up from time to time, just because of its third effects alone. Of course, there just has to be a random hero card here, right? I'm not gonna waste too much time on this. There is virtually zero chance for this card to ever get played. Even if this card allows you to use all of the effects that listed on here, it would still be a bad card. 1 of 2. This is a pretty complicated little card that other people already done a very good job explaining this, so I'm not gonna go too deep into it. But essentially, this card will tutor for any monster in your deck a third of the time, and the other 2/3 of the time it will essentially do nothing. You do always get to banish a trap from your deck, so there is at least a little bit of synergy. The card do have some use case, and it is a pretty funny design, but for the most part, this card will be overlooked by most decks in the game. Moving Point Pendulum. Another overly convoluted design with absolutely no practical use case. Let's not get into the nitty-gritty here. This is gonna be a dream scenario kind of card that some mad genius gonna cook up an FTK for, and that is gonna be the extent of the use case for this card. You can read the card if you want, but you're probably gonna forget about it tomorrow. Northern Crossfire. This is supposedly to be a train support card, but ironically, this is a pretty mediocre card in that deck and are probably more useful in other decks. This card can be activated if the total level of monster you control are 10 or higher, and it allows you to add to your hand or special summon one level 10 monster from your hand or deck. It also has a pretty good graveyard effect, where instead, if your opponent are the one who have 10 or more total levels on their field, you can banish this card and another level 10 monster from your grave to target a card your opponent control and banish it. The activated effect of this card is kinda whatever. You're not really gonna rely on a card like this to tutor for your monster, but the standout part about this card is definitely its second effect. Quick effect removal from the graveyard like this are usually very rare, and they're always very impactful. Just take a card like Big Welcome for example. So I could see something like a build strategy can make use of this card, but it is still pretty niche though, because the cards still do have a lot of conditions to it. And the final card of the pack is Summon Shop. This card said that every time a monster is normal or special summon, place a summon counter on this card, and if the 4th counter is placed on this card, remove all counters from it and send all monsters on the field to the graveyard. A continuous effect that wipes the board every 4th summon. Yeah, I like the design of this. If this is where we're headed with Floodgates, then I think it is a healthy sign. It's not gonna be a strong card, but it's also not weak either. It is just matchup dependent. It really came down to whether decks have a natural out to this or not. If they do, then this card is useless, but if they don't, then this card is gonna be game winning. Still, that probably means that this card won't have any main deck inclusion because of its high variant, but that also should be the space that this kind of card should be living in. And that is all of the cards from Blazing Dominion. Whew, there is a lot of good stuff here. The best card of the set is no doubt the Fidraulis Harmonia. This hand trap will be the most impactful card to be coming out of Blazing Dominion, and it is an auto-include in just about every single synchro deck going forward, and also in every single deck that doesn't really care about the extra deck. Because of that, Kewl Tune and Elfnotes are definitely the big winner of the set, not only getting great support for their already solid core engine, but also getting the help of the Fidraulis Harmonia. For me personally, I am definitely looking forward to the new Clown Clan Archetype. It will definitely be fun clowning around with them. What about you? What card or archetype that is speaking to you from this set? Are you a fiery duelist like Jack Atlas? Or are you looking for a more reserved playstyle like Fairy Tail? Maybe you just want to blast people in their face with Gustav Maxis. Or maybe you're just here for the lore. Well, Blazing Dominion got all that and more. I hope you guys have been enjoying the full set review. Until next time.